Kia ora tātou, kino i tātou, hei mūkui a mātou I hō wāhei tohutohu a mātou mahi katoa. Ko koe anō hoki ai whakakahi a mātou kia whai krore ai koe a mātou mahi katoa he mea tīmata, he mea mahi, he mea whakoti roto I a koe, kia whiwhia hoki mātou ki tō roto ni te mea ata whaitia nei e koe. Āmini. Kia ora.
We just open our formal part of the meeting, and in a couple of minutes we'll come to our deputations and to the receipt of the petition. Thank you. So do we have any declarations of interest, please? None. And we move to the confirmation of the non-confidential minutes of the meeting of the 4th of June. Moved by Councillor Burdett. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor Cranston. Thank you. I put it to the meeting. All those in favour that the minutes be signed as a true and correct record of the meeting of the 4th of June, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. I acknowledge Ms Spates, sorry in welcoming you, but you are a member of this committee, so thank you. Ms Spates here. The action sheet from the meeting of the 4th of June. Welcome, Councillor Worsnott. Are there any questions with respect to the action sheet? Just one, sorry. I have one question which is the first item, and it's been around a while, item 14.3 on page 11, with respect to what is the status of the work, Mr Wilson might know the answer to this, on the Wainui Bridge that has graffiti amongst other things, but it is an NZTA bridge. First item on page 11. The status of some painting, mural work that was to be undertaken on...
Sorry, I was thinking of works above at the top. We've arranged for, we've got some quotes for to be painted onto effectively aluminium, and it will be bolted to parts of the structure. Just going through making those arrangements at the moment.
Thank you. So the report in our paper says installed on the pillars of the bridge if approval is granted from the bridge experts.
Yep.
So what status is that at, please?
We've managed to work out a securing methodology that doesn't damage the bridge structure.
Thank you. So it might be done by next meeting in December.
Yes.
Thank you. The governance work plan, which is formerly a placeholder, is now here in the agenda. Someone like to, is it not? No, I beg your pardon, it's not. It's still a placeholder. I have had no requests for leave of absence nor acknowledgements and tributes, and we move to public petitions and input. I'd like to invite Mr John Wells to come forward and present us his presentation on the potential road realignment around Tutera. Thank you very much, Mr Wells, if you'd like to come up here. And I think you have there's a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you. Please feel free to sit or stand. We'll come here.
Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Good afternoon, and thank you for this opportunity to present a project which I believe would significantly improve our roading network resilience and connectivity with the Central North Island and points north. I'm a semi-retired, locally born and raised civil and structural engineer, and have had a deep interest from school days in finding quicker and easier ways in and out of our region. I believe this is one worthy of thorough investigation. I started looking at a route through Tutera Tipahui as a link into the Central North Island back in the 90s, and that included a site survey and schematic proposal for a proposal for a one-way bridge. My interest has been reignited with more frequent and longer duration closures of the Waiaweka Gorge. And I believe this would be a potential alternative in those occurrences. Those are being very disruptive on delivery of our primary produce to the rest of the country and also essential supplies back in. Another advent, of course, is the Rocket Lab development at Mahia, and again, I think this proposal would be beneficial for that enterprise. That you see on the screen here has got two highlighted yellow routes. The one towards the top of the screen is the obvious normal route north through Whakatane, or Waiaweka Gorge, Whakatane, Rotorua, and then on to Hamilton and Auckland. Obviously, there's an alternative one up through Tauranga as well, which if you're heading for Auckland, may be a quicker route. If the gorge is closed, you have the alternative of heading south for Napier or around the East Cape. The East Cape is obviously not a preferred route. Very poor support in case of emergency or fuel supplies. This proposal I'm looking at would enhance the route south through Bayview and back up through Taupo. If you're heading up to Hamilton or north, there's something like 110k difference at present. The southern route being longer. This proposal would take 40k off that, so it would only come down to about 70k difference from the normal preferred route. This view focuses in on the Te Tira Tipahui. There's Te Tira there and Tipahui over here. These two green sections are already reasonable widths, 9 to 10 metre sealed roads. This section through the middle, which is only about 3, 6 and 7k long, is the bit that needs completed. This length is 24 kilometres. This is 32k and another 32k back up here. So we're cutting off 40k by giving this shortcut through. The work required here is an upgrade of approximately 3 kilometres of existing local gravel road, which is known as Berry Road on the western side, and about 3.5k of forestry track through the Carter Hall Harvey Forest. There's also a bridge over the Esk River in the middle of it. I'll show a little more detail in a few minutes. It would only require a single span bridge, and would need to be a short upgrade on the eastern side, the Waikato side, to improve the quality of that road. This links two 9k sections of 9 to 10 metre wide road, which virtually need no improvement at all. So out of the 24k length of the shortcut, 18k is already there and needs very little attention. An estimated time saving there. I think that 45 minutes might be a little bit high, but certainly 35 to 40 minutes. It is probably the most preferred alternative route when the gorge is closed. I've already mentioned how much it shortens the distance to Hamilton and North, and it would also be an alternative route to Napier should any closures happen around the windy part of State Highway 2, Tutera, Lake Tutera and the Devil's Elbow. Yeah, other considerations. This project is actually located outside of our district. It is located in the Hawke's Bay Regional and Hastings District Council jurisdictions. However, the link would benefit Wairau, Mahia, Tairāwhiti, Gisborne residents, but there's little benefit seen for Hawke's Bay residents, and therefore by Hawke's Bay authorities. This leads to the conclusion that to get any movement on this proposal, we would need to promote it through NZTA to make any headway. On the other side, forest owners Karahold Harvey are keen for a good river crossing to access their eastern forests. And the link, as I've mentioned, would improve access for Rocket Lab vehicles. Here's a picture of the eastern approach, Tutera to Waikoa. Quite a reasonable sort of road, very easy grades and easy curves. Some logging traffic, but virtually needs no upgrading at all. That is at the other end of the shortcut. That's the approach from the Te Pahui end, Ohurakura Road. Again, about a 10-metre wide sealed road, very easy grades and easy alignment. That's a shot of the Esk River at about the location of the proposed bridge, which would be just on the edge of the picture up here to get a reasonable alignment down from the east side and across and then up the west side from the west side. So it's the river itself is only 13 metres across. I have put forward a proposal for a 25 to 30 metre bridge, which would give plenty of flood flow capacity onto the boom here, plus a 30 to 40 metre approach embankment on the west side. So that is the proposal. I believe it meets the government roading objectives. Improve safety, definitely an improvement for connectivity for this district, and certainly an improvement on resilience, considering the very tight windy road around Tutera Lake and the Devil's Elbow. So I would recommend is that this committee gives it full consideration and hopefully promotes some investigation through NZTA. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Can you put back the slide that shows where the road is? And just back up the slides to the one that actually shows where the road goes. We'll just leave that on the screen for a moment. Thank you very much, Mr. Wells. And I'll open the floor to the committee for questions. Thank you. Councillor Walsnott.
So my question is, do you know, or does anybody else know, how often, or if ever, the Wairika and Devil's Elbow close simultaneously?
I can't state how often, but there are two factors coming into play here. One is global warming and the increased intensity of storm events, which is causing bigger damage in terms of rock falls and washouts than, say, 10, 15 years ago. The other aspect is occupational health and safety, sorry, which obviously requires much more consideration for how those events are tackled to be repaired, and therefore a longer time frame.
Sorry, supplementary to that, do we have an idea of what the last prolonged closure of the Wairika cost probably our freight industry?
No, I don't
Not
have
right
that
here at the
information.
moment, I wouldn't know. Tupera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, thank you, John, for your presentation. It has a lot of merit in principle. One concern I have probably to you, Ms. Spate, is in terms of the jurisdiction issue. If it's out of our jurisdiction, I'm assuming that we could, as part of our investigation, if that's going to be undertaken, there has to be discussions with the regional authority south of us. We might be able to get our own funding to put that in, but somebody's going to have to pay for the maintenance of it. So that could be an issue for us, but I'd like to suggest let's not let that be a stumbling block to this. It's just going to be part of the process, I think. So just a comment, but thank you for your presentation. Well done.
And like any system, the transport system's interconnected, and arbitrary lines on a map where boundaries fall don't always reflect the importance of a particular corridor to different communities. So we know, for example, that the Wairika Gorge has a much greater level of importance for this community than perhaps it does for the Bay of Plenty. Similarly, I have other roads in other regions that suffer from the same thing. And that's where we do look quite explicitly across those boundaries. And so we look at, for the Tairāwhiti region, we look both north and south at those key connectors and those journeys. And we factor that in, and we work in terms of looking at how different projects and different opportunities are prioritised. And so the work that you see that's currently being committed through the Wairika Gorge in upgrading those bridges came about because they were identified as being a high priority for this community, even though they sat within a different region. So yeah, we can work across those boundaries.
Are there any further questions? No, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. We appreciate the work that you put into that, and I'm sure we will have further discussion on it because it seems significant for our region. So thank you. Thank you very much. We have access to the PowerPoint and the council records, yes, don't we? Thank you.
Yeah, there is a short summary as well that council has on.
Great. Thank you. Thanks very much. I'd now like to ask Ms. Knoll and Mr. McAllister to come forward, please, and speak to us around the heavy transport and the engine braking. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Annette Knoll, and I reside, along with a lot of neighbours, at the crossroads of the Jolly Stockman Hotel. I've been advocating for 19 years to try and get the screaming trucks to stop screaming. There are boards up asking them to please not engine brake in the urban areas, but they don't see those signs. I've said, I've spoken to the trucking companies. I spoke to a gentleman in Hawke's Bay who didn't want to know. I had a petition signed about 8 years ago and a covering letter to Mr. Foon here. Manu Kari replied, and they were going to see what they could do, and I've heard nothing since. I have no disrespect for that. I know that the council is very busy on other matters, but enough is enough. The trucks start at about 20 to 3 every morning. The last one comes in at 11 at night. They scream down from Bell Road to the crossroads and wake everybody up. They speed, they go too fast, but it doesn't matter what the speed limit is, they still scream. And in the summer, it's even worse because at harvest time, we've got more and more and more trucks on the road and they travel all night and all day. The only time out we get is Good Friday, maybe over Easter, Christmas, between Christmas Eve and New Year's, the day after New Year's Day, and on Sundays until 3 a.m. Monday morning. So what I'd like to propose, if the council would be kind enough to heed our request, is we'd love a bylaw passed preventing engine braking from a 12k radius from the city centre. And I know you're probably a bit concerned about policing it, but I assure you that if you issue 10 infringement notices, they'd soon get the message. But something has to be done, and we are asking you to look with favour on our request. And I'm speaking on behalf of people on the Back Ormond Road. I've been to see them, Bushmere Road, Aupuni Road, Grey Street Roundabout. The poor people at that Cook Motel, they're losing a lot of clientele because of these engine braking trucks. So too the Camping Waikanae Top 10 across the road. They're losing a lot of clientele because of the engine braking trucks. And we'd love to do something to try and accommodate the economy in this town, you know? We need to have things set in place for that kind of thing. So it would be really, really appreciated if a bylaw would be passed so we don't have any more truck noise.
Thank you. Do you wish to speak, sir?
I can't really add to that. Thank you. Thanks, Annie. Only that I'm a resident of Malcolm Road. I just agree with everything that Annie was saying. I'm a long-term resident there. Last night we had a truck driver at Voyage down there said it was 2:19 last night, who put his air horn on at Roberts Road and continued right along our street. And I could hear him going down the Esplanade still. And that's actually, it woke us all up. And that's, I don't know what, where that's coming from, but it's just an example of some people that are out there, apart from the
Could you join us, sir? Please feel free to come forward. It's the same subject. And your voice will be picked up. The meeting is publicised and on public, and our council officers listen to it too. So that's why.
So my name's Boyd McGregor. I live in Aupuni Road, over the road from the brewery, right on the bend that most trucks decide to start slowing down for the roundabout. It's been an increasing situation. We would have approximately 120 events per day of an exhaust brake, and 50% of those would be empty trucks. Now, I myself used to drive a concrete truck. You do not need to use your exhaust brakes in town. Don't get me wrong, nobody's going to complain if Dave McIntosh is carting some big bloody huge piece of machinery and he uses engine brake. That's a one-off thing. But, exactly this morning at 2:19, a truck driver decided to hit his air horn at Roberts Road and kept his hand on the horn until he went around the roundabout at Grey Street. Now, there's a little bit of angst going on Aupuni Road at the moment with Mackindale logging, and there's been an application for them to do something with the log yard, and there's been submissions of objection to it. From the moment that someone knew that there was an objection, there's been horns beat every morning at 4 a.m. by those trucks exiting that yard just to wake up the locals. So, and I have that from the people that live 2 houses from that driveway at 4 o'clock every morning. And so back to myself, my wife and I have been woken up at 2:15-ish for the last 2 months, every morning. And you go, why are we getting such bad sleep? Anyhow, so we wake at 2, but we don't know what woke us. But we do hear the exhaust brake on the empty logging truck at 2:35. And we hear the next one, that's probably about 3, and then 3:30, and then 4, and then 6 of them before 5 o'clock in the morning, and then 12 of them before 6 o'clock in the morning, all empty trucks with engine brakes. Now, I don't know what you people do for sleep, but, you know, we're getting to the stage where we have no complaint about trucks going past. The road surface that was installed, fantastic as far as vibration and trucking noise. Truck goes past us, whether it's loaded or empty, or whether it's carrying freight. If it doesn't use its engine brake, hey, we're happy. We have no complaint whatsoever with the trucking. But, you know, when you start asking everyone down the road, you know, there's a lot of people that are having no sleep at all, and very broken. So we have our grandkids over, and then we've got grandkids waking up in the middle of the goddamn night. And then we've got to try and get them off to school, and we're tired and they're tired, and you know, you get a bit tetchy, really. So I drove back from Levin the other day, and I was going through Waipakarau, Hastings, Napier, and I did notice that Transit had put up a lovely sign, flashing neon, strictly no engine braking. Now, my guess is that either Napier or Hastings have a bylaw, and that Transit's quite happy to aid in the education for the moment. So, I mean, last Christmas I stuck a sign up on the power pole which said, please no engine braking. And on the other side of the power pole I put, truckies, thank you. And then I sat in my front yard and watched, and trucks coming along, and the driver would look at truckies, thank you, and go, what the hell is that? Anyhow, an hour later when he's driving back the other way, he goes, oh shit, no engine braking. And we dropped it from 120 events per day down to 80. And I'm just going, it's an education thing. So, but we still need teeth. And if we have a bylaw, it just gives, NZTA, when I approached them last year, said that, well, we don't have a bylaw, so there's nothing to be done. But in 2020, the council is going to address something, and they have the opportunity to vote for a bylaw. So all we're asking is, you know, should we go down this bylaw avenue and see if we can just reduce the unnecessary engine braking? Don't get me wrong. No one's going to argue if engine braking needs to be used, but like, you know, on an empty truck, and we have a lot of logs that are coming from up the coast. They're going straight past, right through town, out to Dunstan Road. So the engine braking's on one side of the roundabout. Those logs go out there. Those logs get cut. Then the truck comes back with them to take them to the wharf. We get engine braking this side, and you get, and then the trucks that are carting those logs back to the wharf have the trailers down, because it's not an economical distance for the logging truck to put his trailer up and reduce the road user charge. So go and have a look at the Grey Street Penny Road roundabout and see where the wheels go, because they don't go around it. And this is like hourly, you know, like 24 hours a day, you know, they're carting logs. Sunday night included, you know, like 12:30 on a Sunday night. Kadunk, rattle, crash past. You know, like it's relentless. So I do think that, you know, the one thing we're not complaining about is the potential increase in traffic by putting more logging trucks into Penny Road. You haven't got my complaint. My complaint is address the issues we've already got. More noise. There's a few health and safety issues as far as there's a couple of spots in that road that probably need yellow lines. But I spoke to someone, engineer right there sitting on his laptop, at the meeting we had in the foyer the other, and it was just, you know, like, address the issues we have in the road right now, by all means. But, you know, we have to be proactive. I'm cutting out half my front fence so that my neighbours can see the roundabout and the traffic approaching, because, you know, we got people in their late 80s trying to back into onto a road that's got logging trucks in it, and we're going to get more logging trucks. You know, and like, as I say, just address the issues that we have, and then by all means. So thank you for letting me have a little spiel. But, you know, it is a concern. I've been 39 years in that road, and you know, like, it's gone from a little quiet street down the beach to something different now, so, but we need to live with it. I don't intend going anywhere else, but we just need a little bit of.
Our process is that we can only ask questions, so I'll just give the committee the opportunity to ask questions, and then we have to take it from here ourselves. So are there any questions from any members of the committee? Thank you. Worship the Mayor.
Is this the first time you've raised this issue with the Gisborne District Council around, I know you said you've raised it with NZTA because the state highway is NZTA. Is this the first time you brought this to this committee to talk about a possible bylaw?
Probably this committee, because I approached the council maybe August last year, and then they said, oh, well, it's nothing to do with us, it's Transit Road, try LTNT. So then I left a message with them and they got back to me, and it was a lovely lady on the end, and she informed me that our district doesn't have a bylaw. So other than saying please, we don't have any teeth or any requirement. And she had said that until the council has an opportunity to do a bylaw, it's no point pushing it. So she was going to send a reminder around to everyone post-Christmas to all the trucking companies, asking them if they could pass it on to their employees. I could give you some of my email messages to trucking companies, asking them to ask their employers, the employees, to be a bit quieter. I could even give you the truck numbers of, and there's certain ones that are still doing it, even having been asked. And so, yeah.
Also, what we can be reminded is most of these new big trucks now have got a button on the dashboard. You just press it and it changes the gears without screaming. And it's just there to use, but they, there are a few more mature drivers who are very, very good. And I'm all for progress. I know that these men have to feed families, but there's no need on the Poverty Bay flats to engine brake. They're designed for downhill runs only. Or, as Boyd said, carting big, big pieces of machinery and what have you. It's just a courtesy thing, we just had enough. We really have. So, oh yeah, 2 years ago, Councillor, sorry. 2 years ago, I rang the district council and I spoke to a gentleman in the transport division who informed me. I said, could we have a bylaw? I explained everything to him and he said, look, it's in the hands of the lawyers as we speak. Give me a ring in another year. It takes about a year to go through. Give me a ring and you should have the answer. So 3 months ago I phoned. The person has left the Gisborne District Council and no such laws ever put before the lawyers. I was very disappointed to be lied to. So I held off. For all that time, we could have come here and talked to you a little earlier. So anyway, thank you. I've had you.
Yes. I'd just like to say also we have our Puni school down there, which at the moment, if you go down at 3:45 till 3:30 or say in the morning, but you'll find that the logging trucks back up. There's a major concern with the parents parking their cars on the sides of the road, both sides of the road, very narrow, and it gets very congested and dangerous. And also, I think the speed limit should be looked at in that area, particularly from, say, Stanley Road to
while we normally don't respond back because our
Oh,
rules
sure.
are noted, but I'm just going to
Okay,
tell you
that's cool.
that later in our agenda today, we do have speed limit restrictions for around primary schools. Yes, so we will be discussing that today, and that will be one.
Sorry,
No, you can talk about it. I just didn't want, normally I wouldn't ask
yeah.
you, but it's silly to send you out of here today without proper information. We
Thank
sure
you
do,
very
the
much.
bylaw is a separate thing, but today we are looking at reduced speed around the school.
The other thing is with the tourist industry, the motor camp and the motels around Salisbury, etc. We have a lot of people on foot coming into the roundabout at Grey Street and Old Penny Road. And sometimes the people, they obviously have little children on scooters and travel prams. And this is a regular basis, crossing that crossing. Now, as Boyd pointed out, when the trucks come around, I've taught my big kids not to stand near the road because they actually can't get around the roundabout properly and they come up on the footpath. So yes, initially it's tight around that cross. But There's great danger there that, particularly folk from, they're trying to get to the brewery, you know, Gisborne Gold, etc. But they're sort of all happy in that, and then they're picked up across the middle, and understand that these trucks can come so close, you know. It's a fact.
And we need to look at the roundabout as well.
Yeah, the roundabout is.
When I was at the council meeting in the foyer the other day, one issue I raised was, you know, as far as, there was discussion over Almond Road versus. So in saying we don't have an objection to all trucks being on our street, because if I had to pay the bill, I'd certainly get transit to pay for the bumps as well, so I wouldn't worry with that. But it was just a little thing like, all of our tourists and our campers all come from the Salisbury Road to the beach area of town. And they cross Arpany Road. And so, yes, they cross the roundabout and they go to town. But the ones that come along, want to go and check the brewery, they're not going to walk across the road and go down the grass and the mud to the brewery. They're going to walk along the footpath, and the footpath goes to my house, and then the road bends. And so then I see all these people stand outside my house going, logging truck, car, logging truck, logging truck, logging truck, logging truck, go. Well, you got to realise that half of those people think the bloody traffic's on the wrong side of the road already. And so if you were to consider reducing the speed, so instead of 50k down to 40, that gives 20% more time for those people who step when they shouldn't to save their lives. And it was the same issue with the trees that were going to get planted between my driveway and the roundabout. We tried that years and years ago, and we almost have cyclists and cars, people getting hit. You have to have clear, absolutely clear vision, as I say, you know, just an opportunity that maybe speed might be a consideration that the council could do, or suggest to transit that we do something like that. The only other thing I noticed was down near the Adventure Playground, where we have Mossies and River Sun and Bank Street. The way the road's designed, we have parking on one side of the road, which is on the side of the playground. Well, it's fantastic, because all the commercial properties on that side of the road have clear visual access. It's not about going in, sometimes about turning back into the traffic flow. And so then you look at Arpany Road between Arpany School and Grey Street, and you've got the Gull service station, you've got mechanics, and you've got the brewery, and you've got the coffee shop, and you've got John Deere, those guys right there, and you have all the commercial guys on that side of the road. If you put the parking just onto the footpath side of the road rather than the other side, all of that traffic could enter the traffic flow with vision. I mean, I did, as one example, say, go to the Gull service station and have a go at driving out towards Arpany School. Because the 4 employees of John Deere park their vehicles 1, 2, 3, 4, and one guy parks his vehicle on the grass, and their fence is a big, huge plastic screen. And I defy you not to put the nose of your vehicle in front of a logging truck before you see it, because there's no vision. But if you were to put all your parking on one side, all of those commercial properties on that side of the road, access would be safe as houses. And having parks on that side of the road gives the residents more chance to put the rear end of their vehicle out. Or I mean, well, for me, I'm trying to make it so I turn around in my driveway, because.
Thank you.
Anyhow.
Appreciate that.
That's
Any
me.
last question from the committee? Thank you, Mr. Trooper.
Hello.
Both of you, long time no see.
I know.
Thank you. Yeah, this is a big one. So as I understand it, one of the priorities for our committee is safety. And it was always in my thinking, it was the safe use of the road. But obviously safety also applies to those people who live beside or have businesses next to the road. Through you, just a comment, through you, Madam Chair, it's also an environmental issue when you've got sound, noise and sound. Right, so it becomes an issue in that regard. Very concerned about the issue of safety though. And I understand that Awapuni Road is state highway, not something that we look after. But I do understand that we have the ability to pass a bylaw.
We will investigate that further, Mr. Trooper.
And I just wanted to, just on that, Madam Chair, ask you the question. So in terms of follow-ups, I'm assuming the staff are taking notes of what's been presented. when does that come back to us to consider once we have more information so we can respond to these people as a committee or as a group? How does that work?
Thank you. Mr. Kaihuri?
Through the chair, so as you know, we're currently just completing engagement on the heavy vehicle route bypass. So we'll investigate whether we can include engine braking kind of matter, if we can, into that bylaw review, if that's an opportunity. And that paper's being discussed at Sustainable Tide next week.
And for you, Madam Chair. So is where this committee and the staff within the council are working through this, are we keeping these people informed as to how that's progressing? Or do they have to wait and come back again another day? How does that work?
We can.
If we, can I, through you, suggest that that happens?
Can I just ask Mr. Wilson, do you wish to comment on the bylaw issue, Mr. Wilson? No, thank you. Thanks, Mr. So yes, we will come back to you.
Thank you
and
very
keep
much.
you informed. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you. I'd now like to invite Araha to present the petition. Araha, my apologies, I don't have a surname. No matter. Thank you very much to the residents for that presentation. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a petition from the residents of the top of the coast. Thank you very much. Welcome. Thank you. You want to sit? You're most welcome to pull the other chair over. One of you sit while the other speaks. Thank you. You can stand or sit, whichever you're comfortable with. You can sit while you wait for your colleague. Excuse me, you can sit while you wait for your colleague and then take a chair.
First off, I want to take this opportunity on behalf of the Wee Ngāti cluster to present our petition to this committee. So thank you so much. My name is Aroha Cooling. I am the Secretary of the Wee Ngāti cluster of marae. There are 5 marae, and of our 5 marae, 4 are directly affected by what we're petitioning for. I'm going to quickly read. Oh, this is Tina, also part of the Wee Ngāti cluster, and Tina is the lead of our working group, and she also lives in this area for which we're petitioning. Now, we don't have a map, sorry. Okay. So our road. Now we live Muratoria beyond Muratoria. So it's not even a state highway, really. We live beyond that. Now, in our community, we're very culturally steeped. We are, that is what we live, that is what we breathe. We have, like I said, for just our cluster, there are 5 marae just in our cluster, and we're one of 7 clusters. Now, our road, the road that we're petitioning for, it's the Kailinanga Hill. Now, this hill, we've got State Highway 35, so you're going from Gisborne right around and you're going to Te Aroha. That's State Highway 35, which goes around to Portuguese. The Kailinanga Hill is between State Highway 35, sorry, it's the other side of State Highway 35 and our Waiapu River. That is our river, that is our river. And the Kailinanga is just that side of it. We're talking dirt road. We are talking a hill that goes like this. Now, so we're talking access way, and our road from between that Kailinanga Hill, because that's the only way for us to access the other side, that road from there to the end of the road, which takes us right to the end to the sea, is often unsafe. It is often inaccessible, especially in the winter months. Now, we still have whānau who live in that valley, whether by choice, whether by whakapapa, whether for economic reasons. We have whānau who live in the valley still, who have chosen to stay in the valley. They travel in and out of that valley. They have to travel in and out for work. They have to travel in and out for school. People have to travel in for work. We have to have emergency services come in. Sometimes they can't come in. Often they can't come in. Safety. We can't attend our meetings at our marae. Our marae for us are very important. We can't go to our marae. Our tangi can't go to their marae. They can't get over the hill, especially in the winter months. And this is the reality of what happens to us, especially in the winter months. We're asking that the Gisborne District Council repair the road. Various repairs have taken place over the years, but we always come back to the same position where our road is unsafe, particularly in the winter months, inaccessible, and frankly scary. And that's the part that Tina will talk about. So we're asking for our road to be fixed. We want a permanent fix, more permanent than we've had already. We want a road that is accessible all year round. We're asking for a road that is safe all year round, in all weather. That's what we're asking for. And, you know, as I say, it's a cultural thing, it's a social thing, it's an economic thing, and educational. What we decided to do was start a petition. So what we've effectively done, we're new to this process. So for us, what we have done is said, officially, we would like to put a stake in the ground, you know, to do something about it, to have something done about it, and for us to work together to do something about it. Hang on. I'm just going to read a bit of a background about our Kailinanga. Now, at least in recent history, the access over the hill into the Waimatatini Valley, because that's what it is, has been unreliable. For the 65 people who currently live in the valley, and for others who would have needed to go to the valley, access in and out is dependent on the road conditions. The unreliable accessibility is a feature of the colder months especially, particularly in times of frequent rainfall, and we've had a lot of that rainfall, and we've had a lot of lack of access to in and out on our road recently. The concern with our road starts at the hill, because that is the source to get us to the valley, and it includes the Kakariki Road, which is where one of our marae is. It includes the Tikapa Road, where another marae is. It includes the Port Awanui Road, where another marae is. And even before you get to those marae, one of our chief marae, Poraurangi, actually is in that valley. So that's so important culturally for us. And, you know, now many people have grown up in the Waimatatini Valley. Now older people's recollections shared with them, and those shared with them by their own elders, tell us that the road has been a problem for at least 60 years. We hear that attempts to build a bridge across State Highway 35 have failed. We hear that it failed twice. We know it's not an easy thing, but to us it's a really important thing. There's recorded attempts to create a roadway through Ahikoka Station. We're told that there is still some sort of path through there. If you've got a four-wheel drive, you could possibly go through there. Okay. But that's going right around, coming out somewhere else. Now, road repairs have been attempted many times. We appreciate those efforts, but we're now asking for longer-term solutions. Our ideal is that our road fix is with greater permanence, and we want that accessibility, safe accessibility all year round. That's all we're asking for. So it came about that we decided we would do the petition, and we believe we have got great support from our people, many support.
Thank you.
And I will now pass it over to Tina.
Sure, Tina.
Thank you. Kia ora everybody, I'm Tina Jews. I'm a local resident. I live out Waimatatini, been there for 20 years, married a local man. We've got 4 boys together, so we live on Kakariki Road. So myself, as a mother, I have children that have to go to school. There are 13 children that go on that road to get to school. On top of that, there's 3 high school students and the other 10 primary school. We also have new mothers out there who have got babies, ranging from newborn, 8-month, 9-month-olds. We have kaumātua out there, with 4 kaumātua. And with the state of the road, the priority is safety. I cannot voice that more importantly than anything else. That road is actually very, very uncomfortable to drive on. Even if you do have a 4-wheel drive or a motorbike or the skills to do it, it is still an uneasy experience to be on. So today, that's why we're here, to try and resolve what we can. There's a lot of whānau out there that rely either on their small businesses to make an income. There's farming out there employs, you know, some of the locals. There's farming need to get, or even the small businesses need to get trucks in and out to trade with stock, to sell, buy in, you know. On top of that, we've got forestry workers. We've got, you know, the scope of the people that live out there is very broad. And I think after this winter, it's probably been one of the wettest winters I can remember, to be honest. Yeah. Thank you. And then on top of that, we have put in a data system where we've got everybody on record, their names, addresses, for civil defence reasons. If a fire truck can't get over, what are we going to do? If ambulance can't get over, especially in the night time, what are we going to do because the truck can't come in? So we're asking for support in all those areas. And, you know, I have spoken to some local mums that have to bring their children in every day because the bus can't get out there. We've got to go in every morning. Not that that's a problem, but it's the commuting on that road, going to and from. It's actually really dangerous. At the moment, there's black bear contractors out there. Now the road has been closed since Tuesday from 5 o'clock in the morning, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5:30 at night. So we can't go out there until they've done their job. I have got plenty of other photos that I would like to present at the next council meeting. I'm not too sure what else to add to this, but all I can say is that just safety is really, really important to the 65 residents that live out there. Yeah.
But how do the children get to school? Do they have to go over the road before 8 o'clock and then come
Yes,
home
yeah, so
after 5?
that's mother's responsibility, put them in a truck, get them to Ruatoria, or we've got some kids that go to Ngata, some kids that go to Hiruharama, and some kids that actually commute all the way up to Te Araru, to Rehikoru. So, you know, and just children are resilient, you know. And they love going to school. So, you know, that's our responsibility as parents to get our kids in and out of that valley, morning and afternoon. You know, that's just what we've got to do. But at the moment, we're still finding it hard. Farmers still need to sell stock. We can't get trucks out there, even when the road was, you know, we kind of like, we actually want a permanent solution, no more Band-Aid jobs. And if you look at the hill geographically, it's straight opposite the Mahapō River. Yes. And there needs to be a lot of support put down on the bottom of that river, whether you need to drain it or just change the course of the river for a couple of weeks, it's not going to hurt. But, you know, you're looking at people's lives. I mean, even the way the contour of the hill is at the moment, there's trees overhanging the road like that. And that's because the top of the hill is moving that way. It's not a very nice feeling.
Thank you. Can I just ask to the Chief Executive, is this on a visit for us to go next week? We have, some of us who've been around this table for longer have been to the hill previously, and I know it's a long-term thing, but we are going up there on the second weekend in September, and council officers have indicated we are coming to look again, but that still requires follow-up, doesn't it? Looking is only one thing. Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. I just need to ask gentlemen at the committee, are there any questions to the ladies? Thanks.
Just a comment, ngamihi kia korua mo te whakatakotoranga o tēnei kaupapa hohonu. This has been around for a long time, for our people up there. Whilst safety is a primary issue, so too is culture. And through you, Madam Chair, that needs to be one of the lead factors in terms of the I know there's prioritisation that takes place in terms of where jobs can be done and can't be done just yet. But certainly if it's a cultural as well as a safety issue, then that needs to be given priority, given the composition of our community. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you both very much for coming. Oh, sorry, Councillor Worsnop.
With trucks not being able to get it, how are people getting stock out?
Chase it over the hill.
Walking them out, through them out of horses and motorbikes.
That would actually be making things worse, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think too with because there's been so much erosion, if you look at the state of the hill, you know, when it's going to rain again, those slips, you know, we call them terraces, I don't know what the real name is, but then when they're going to fill up with water, that hill's just going to keep moving. So, you know, there's a lot of damage that's already been done, and it's actually really sad because you've got hundreds of bollards just sitting there and they're not getting put to use. And we just want to please see something done for safety issues for everybody that needs to get in and out, that lives there, you know, it's just a priority.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Trouble to come, and thanks for the petition. That's great. Thank you. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you. Thank you. I have no request for extraordinary business unless someone's got one right now. No. Nor notice of motion, nor items of adjourned business. So we move to the first item, which is the report of the Chief Executive, which is item on page 13, Regional Land Transport Program Development. Yeah, item 10.1 on page 13. Who's going to lead that? We can give you a couple of chairs back now. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this report is basically a continuation from the workshop that we had in August. It goes through sort of formalising some of the things that were looked at that workshop. So the strategic framework and the problem statements that were discussed at that workshop. It also presents in a very draft form. Well, it presents the prioritisation methodology that we also discussed for the improvement activities. Again, noting that just stepping back, also the significance, the definition of significance for the purpose of prioritising activities. So for the regional land transport plan, I'll just take 1 second. There are 2 definitions of significance. One is for activities to be prioritised, to say is an activity significant enough to be prioritised, and then the other one goes to if activity, a variation is significant. So sorry, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself, but so formalising some of those things that we worked through at the workshop, presenting a draft program for discussion, and sort of the proposed prioritisation mechanism. I also just wanted to take one moment just to talk about the regional land transport plan timeframes. We have had a movement in the timeframes from the drafting of this report. Waka Kotahi has indicated that their investment proposal will has been delayed again. It will probably, I think, indications around the first week of November at this stage. I'm sure, Emma, you'll be able to give an update later on. It is looking like I think in this report, we talk about a draft RLTP being presented to the next RTC committee in December, that we're unlikely to reach that timeframe. We'll be looking at the new year for a draft in consultation at this stage.
Can we just ask about that, please? Because that's quite significant, but I'd like to know how much impact. It's all very well to be delayed, but it's probably not going to change the dollars hugely.
So there's probably two really important things. The first one is that the board has determined that it will extend the full timeline for the process for submission of RLTPs by 2 months, so from the end of April to the end of June, and then extend the implementation of the new National Land Transport Program by 2 months as well. Now that happened, if you recall, after the last election. We did the same thing, but at a much later stage in the process because of the scale of change that came through the GPS at the time. So the board has made a decision that was notified, I think early last week, the week before, that the time would be extended and all the systems and processes to support that would be put into place. Now that means that for the, so this is separate to the Waka Kotahi investment proposal. So that means that for the overall timeline, the councils and RTCs can determine how they want to shift their own timeline in response to that. Most of the RTCs that I've been talking to are looking, therefore, who had been going to sign out a draft in December are now looking to do that in early February, and then run their consultation period later so they avoid the Christmas period. Some are trying to still look to sign out a draft in December, but still delay their consultation until early in the 2021 year. So it is up to councils and RTCs to determine how they then respond to that, but it does provide a bit more flexibility and time to do that in a way that links best or avoids LTP consultations and so on. But the Waka Kotahi investment proposal, until we have the GPS, is a bit challenging for us to release. And we don't yet have a date for the release of the GPS.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr. Wilson what advice you have for this committee, if anything, at the moment? Because the more you push it out, the more difficult, or else it creates a double lot of consultation if it's into the new year. Do we have a position on this yet, Mr. Wilson?
Through you, Chair. So a lot of our consultation isn't timed until next year anyway, with the majority of what we're putting out for our long-term plan and those things. So we have pre-engagement, which is underway now around our long-term plan, but our long-term plan engagement proper starts early in the new year. So it will be able to time in with what we will have out as part of that. It's just pre-engagement at the moment, not the LTP engagement.
Sure, as long as it's not pushed out again though, from NZTA's role.
Could I just mention, as Emma was saying last time round, so the 2018 Regional Land Transport Plan ended up being consulted on at the same time as the long-term plan. So we're still trying at this stage or proposing at this stage to have the RLTP consultation prior to the long-term plan. So because it did get a little bit messy with the overlap, but yeah, that's what we're aiming for at the moment still.
Thank you. So which portion of the document do you want to speak to? I mean, I think the committee would be very interested in the prioritisation and the justification of the prioritisation, but it may be that you want to address some of these outcome framework that's being set up, which is on page 21.
It's over to you. The framework and the problem statements, as mentioned before, have been seen at earlier meetings and workshops. So I'm happy if unless there are any further comments on those bits, I'm happy to move to discussion on the
speaker. This is on page 24 for everyone's benefit.
Oh, sorry, no, I'm on page 22, the framework.
Right.
I just had a little cluster of questions actually. So we talk about economic performance and the percentage of customers satisfied with conditions. I just, who are we asking? Are we asking a broad spectrum of everybody, or is, because in all the stuff I've read, I think we've only got a survey for urban residents. Is that right? Or are we doing rural? Are we asking industry? How broad is that? And then I've got a couple of others.
Our current measure for that is just done through the resident satisfaction survey, which is district-wide. So they do separate responses from the rural and urban areas. So we do get answer from. At the moment, we report them separately, urban and rural roads separately for.
But it doesn't distinguish industry, does it?
No, it does not.
Just the regular.
It's just
satisfaction
residents.
survey.
It doesn't. And so when we were looking at these targets, that was a question about whether that we need to have some more customer satisfaction metrics around industry and
For the sake of, I guess, leaving it to chance, ensuring that you are getting kind of the voice that you needed from all the different sectors of, you know, the people that we want to be telling us. I also had a question just around the economic performance as well, that middle box where it talks about ensure the cost and benefit links between primary industry and road maintenance are clearly understood. I just wondered whether clearly understood was worthy of being a 30-year vision. You know, I mean, you would hope we understand it before then. Should it be optimised, you know?
Page 22 and the top of the middle box and the third bullet point.
That doesn't really seem that aspirational. You know, I'd hope that we're achieving something rather than just understanding something.
Sure. So the middle column there is actually the policies section. So it's split by objectives, and then the policies are basically the how we will achieve our objectives statements. So it's more a statement about saying we need to understand, you know, and yeah, it's ongoing, you know, and have that in mind every time we're putting together the work program. And that's, yeah, it's like the way we work.
To Mr. Gilmore and Mr. Weatherall, do you want to make any comment on those measures, because it relates to Councillor Worsnop's first question? To what degree does the industry, and I mean, you've come and you're prepared to put some time into it, so do you feel that the feedback that you might have to provide is adequately provided for? I'm not saying given at the moment, but is there opportunity?
Certainly be good to have some opportunity to give some feedback. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Can we find it? Can we ensure that if we're going to set this up as a principal way that we're going to secure feedback, since it is, you know, other matters are covered as in the headlines, if you look at the outcomes, then we need to be talking to the industry and user groups rather than just taking the feedback out of that satisfaction survey?
Yes, and part of the RLTP development, the next stage will be developing a monitoring framework. It's a requirement under the LTMA, and it's the area that we haven't done particularly well in the past in terms of setting up those metrics for reporting, as you'll see in the monitoring report later on.
Yes, Councillor Burdett. You're speaking, please.
Note the change in project timelines. You've talked that one through. Approve the draft strategic framework. Jump forward to definition of significant activities and the purpose of prioritisation. This is all bureaucratic speak. When do we get to the nub of, in terms of this list here, and talking to our community, so we actually know what we want to put in our plan? These guys are not going to sit around the table and twiddle their thumbs while we dwell on this stuff. We really need to get down to getting on with the job. Maybe I'm out of line here, Madam Chair, but
No, councillor Burdett, you're not out of
this
line
is
at all.
this is so important for the district.
Yeah, right.
And the other question, my leading question is, does the $2 million threshold apply to every project? If that does, where does that leave us in terms of our share? Have we got the money for that?
Would someone like to answer that? Because I think there's two things together there. Are you going to answer that, Ms. Spate?
If I start with the prioritisation process, what's really important and in the recommendations here is that the committee has had the time to consider the draft strategic framework and the proposed prioritisation process. This isn't the session where the prioritisation is done because you don't have the Waka Kotahi investment proposal yet, and you need that to do the full thing. This is showing you how the prioritisation process works when applied to these projects, so that you've got a really good basis for saying, yes, this prioritisation process aligns with the priorities that we've set in this framework, and when applied to projects, it delivers a result that aligns with, so that we're able to see it. Because the actual process of prioritising has to wait till we have all the information to do it. So that's why this is actually really important, because if there's something in the way that the prioritisation has been set out that does not make sense, now is the time to resolve it. So that's really important. And then there's the thresholds. So you have a significant threshold for the council, and then there's also the low cost, low risk threshold for those continuous programs of work. So if something's below low, it's in low cost, low risk, then it has a slightly different approval process and so on that sits within it. But you can choose your prioritisation, to make sure everything aligns with it. But the question then of what gets funded will come back to where you set your rates for transport and the amount of funding you have available, and also whether things get over the business case thresholds for approval for funding for the National Land Transport Fund.
Would you like to explain, for the benefit of everyone though, when you look at the schedule on page 24, we have some number ones, but we don't have any 2s and 3s. And I know there's a reason for that, but could you just outline why it is, why there is
the thing here?
Okay.
That is just a function of that Excel spreadsheet. When you have numbers that are the same, that's like 3 equal number ones there. I think so it just skips down to number 4. Yeah. I'm not an Excel master, and the asset managers prepared this spreadsheet. So
yeah, if I could just briefly talk to it. So for transport, we've actually had an advantage that we've been able to bring our initial program forward, but this hasn't actually gone to the council yet, because the council is going to have to look at this suite of projects versus all the other projects within council and then make a decision. So some of these are more likely could be put on, some may be put off. So this is until, so that's, but what we've got 2 processes. One, we're actually putting our regional land transport program, that's our funding bid to the Waka Kotahi, and that goes state high. And then there's the other bit, the LTP, where that's where we get the rate. So we've actually got 2 processes trying to move, and they do juggle between the 2. So you'll find the asset management team are going backwards and forwards, and it'll change. And we'll get some feedback from the GPS, and then we may have to do some more tweaks in there. And then we'll get some feedback once we go out to consultation. I'll go, oh, yep, okay. And you'll be asking us, that consultation was really important. can you do some adjustments in your program? And there'll be some tweaks. And then, so this tweaking will be between council, and then it'll come back to the regional transport committee. We're going this way and that way until we finally settle on a program that comes back that will, usually it settles around June. So once the council sets the rates for the program of what they want to do overall, we'll get our indication of what rates, then that will support what we can get from the regional land transport program. So it's a bit of a this way, that way. But this is just the first, and it just gives you an understanding. So what used to happen is a bit like the regional development roading program, Councillor Burdett. There was so much money. There was so much money, but we had more projects than money. And so what it did is it set a line. These are all the projects, and then depending on what comes out of the GPS, the line can go up, it can go down, and then you can see what gets funded, what doesn't get funded. So this is just the first part. But good thing about it, usually this would all happen around March, April, May, June, and everyone's telling me, at least we're in September. We're actually in a good place. We just have to, just carry on and until we get that information, go from there.
Yes, certainly.
We only have 4 meetings a year. I need the second assurance, and I don't know who's going to give me that. When we go to consultation, it will be our community, the wider community, that determines ultimately what goes into our plan, not us.
So through you, Madam Chair, if I can jump in here. This is an iterative process. The first thing we have to do is put forward a program to work with Waka Kotahi about what it is that they're going to be putting forward through their NLTP and how it aligns with the GPS to make sure that where we're going is in line with where government funding is going for the next 3 years. So basically we're putting up a program to check with them that it is eligible, all of us knowing that it will change as we go out through community consultation. And when I say change, for example, we could go out and a community pushes really hard and lobbies for a new footpath to be put down the side of a road that we haven't included as part of this process. What happens is when someone comes up with a new project like that and council says, yep, that's something we're interested in, we go back and assess it against the same framework that we've been working with the agency on as to whether or not it should get funded and how far up that priority ranking. So can we get the National Land Transport Fund share? If we can and we agree to that, then it comes into our long-term plan and it drops in that way. But of course, if one comes in, something's got to come out or we have to get more money. And that's when it goes back to the council table for them to decide whether or not those things go in. So as Dave said, this is the start of an iterative process and it's got more on there than we can afford as a community. And then we know that we are going to have to work with the agency around whether or not we can get a share for it with some of those things that go forward. So we prioritise it. We work with Wellington to decide what funds are available. We consult with our community. Things can change again, but it all gets locked down by 30 June after rounds of consultation and that we actually know what we can and can't afford based on the budgets that we have for maintenance or other capital works in that prioritisation process.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson. I'm just going to have a go before Mr. Burdett. The point is, though, that this is a committee and it's been put before us. So I think it's really important that we hear from anyone around the table of the committee to give some feedback. Otherwise, it's just simply a rubber stamp. So we've all had this agenda and I'm sure we've been able to look at that prioritisation list, and I really welcome any questions that anyone around the table might have around the level of priority that's been provided for the moment and the justification for it. Because as Mr. Wilson says, it goes back to council. And if this committee doesn't have a role and function to give some input into it, then why does it come here at all? And so I do really want to encourage people around the table to have input or ask questions if that's all you wish to do before it then goes to council and then later it comes back to us. But I think it is really important for the Regional Land Transport Committee to have a function that people get given the opportunity. I'll start by asking you why we've, it's actually over a couple of pages over, 24, and it's got traffic services maintenance. What are those? And then I see somewhere else we've got traffic services, first cousin. So what are traffic services maintenance, please?
So they're split into what we call operational costs and then we could have renewal costs. So your traffic services are, like your signs, and if there's one that's been knocked over, then of course we will replace it. So that's just a definition, and there's we can give you the list of what qualifies within those traffic
At
services.
1.8 million a year for the first 3 years of the LTP, and it's just signs.
Oh, no, it's a
And
lot
then the
more than that.
next
It's
thing is-
power, it's traffic signal. We can give you the list of what it is, councillor.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And then I've got another one down here. I'm just giving everyone else time to think about what they might want to ask. 91,000 a year for 3 years for level crossing warning devices.
Yeah, it's railway crossing, so like Lytton Road, every year we
But
get,
that's been tar sealed over and it's got a small sign there that says no trains use this anymore. So why are we budgeting 90,000 a year for 3 years?
that's because when people go to the crossings, if you notice the crossings, they do fall apart, and so that's what the detail was in there. So it's to fix the railway crossings. And we do get a lot of RFPs for those councils.
I haven't heard those. Yeah. Okay, so my question was, where's the money going to be spent? So it's going to be spent on Lytton Road and where else?
There's Lytton Road, there's Stanley Road, there's 3 of them. There's also the one we've got at Manapapa. Yeah. And also, just remember the railway group, because crossing, they've actually got the license, you know, for the train. Well, they come to council for funding because they don't have enough funding to support their railway crossing. So that's that detail.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so other questions?
Right.
Thank you. I'll come back to you in a moment. Mr. Tupera and then
thank you.
Councillor Worsnop and then Councillor
Thank you for your work. I'm interested in the sort of the strategic approach to things. And so in regards to the draft strategic framework, I'd want to work with your people if I can. So I think in my view that there should be, given again the composition of our community, that there should be a, trying to find the right terminology, but a hapu iwi cultural overlay that permeates throughout the document and that steers the strategy. So that doesn't mean to say that we have, and I think I made this comment before, a document that's bilingual. What it really means is that hapu and iwi are recognised and have a role to play. And consultation is part of that, but it's more having key people, and there are some key people already, I understand, sitting alongside those who do the work, who actually get involved in the activities. So what I'd like to suggest, given that it is a draft, is in working with you folk, maybe for the next hui or whenever, is to work with you to actually develop a cultural overlay that permeates throughout the strategy. And all it does is just provides it enhances the framework, but it also steers away from, and Mr. Burdett's quite right, in some respects, this is very much I hesitate to say, but could become a cut and paste exercise. Whereas if we give it a character that's unique to our community, but still have the key ingredients to satisfy wherever the investments are placed in this, and so on, it becomes more reflective of our community, particularly our Māori community. And if we get the draft strategic framework right in that regard, it'll filter down throughout the rest of the document. So it's not just a recognition in words of, say, the Treaty of Waitangi. What it is the actual document reflects that. Actually reflects that. And I'd like to, given what I'm able to offer, work with your people to develop that over time, which will then lead to consulting with the hapu and iwi. And when they'll say, yep, that's cool, we'd like to do it this way, that kind of fits how we see it, but it just provides a framework. Because to be honest, Mr. Bird is quite right. If this was presented to our Māori people right now, they'd go, wow, you know, what relevance does this have to our community, particularly our Māori people? So nō reira, he tono tēnei ki a koutou, just offering to assist you with developing that. Kia ora.
So as per the 2 previous RTCs, we have discussed the development of this strategic framework. And we've obviously got timelines that we need to meet to continue this iterative development. So I would absolutely support that, and I understand our staff will be sending those requests and invitations to you. But in terms of adopting and approving today, is there a possible amendment that we can to ensure that the draft strategic framework reflects a cultural and hapu overlay as it is, so we can come back with what that looks like in terms of the framework, as opposed to stopping and having to bring it back again, because it has been to committee twice, where that feedback could have, if we
And
didn't
you
know,
did-
and then we could have had that
You
now.
did give the feedback because it's in the minutes. I've read the same comments Mr. Trevor has just
That
made.
was during the development of the actual plan, so in consultation, absolutely, that was my recollection of that, but in terms of including an overlay here, if we could amend the recommendation, that we will develop that with you, but as it is, and figure out
But
how
the
that
content
fits
at
in.
the moment. It's the
Yeah, in
content.
terms of number 2 of the recommendations.
Are there any other comments that you, gentlemen or Ms. Herbert would like to make with respect to the prioritisation part of the document?
I just wondered if any work has been progressed on prioritising modes of transport and the different modes of transport and safety on footpaths and cycle lanes and that type of work has been done, and if that's been considered in here, in line with the GDC spatial plan.
Yes, it has. So the main walking and cycling project that was already in from the last regional land transport plan was the Taruhiru walking and cycling way. There is another report going to Sustainable Tairāwhiti next week around that project, just highlighting that that's the main, that is our main walking and cycling project at the moment, and it is 100% externally funded, so there's no council budget for that project at the moment. There is also, in terms of the spatial plan, we've included a couple of projects in here, that Vibrant City one around the CBD, Grey Street shared spaces, that's coming from the spatial plan. And also there is planning budget that has been increased over the next RLTP, or proposed to be, and that it will include, that's for include a regional walking and cycling plan, and also public transport planning or investigation. So that's why, that's part of the reason why that planning budget has been increased, or proposed to be increased.
When it goes to consult, I would appreciate if you would consult the disability community, and I'm really happy to help you set up that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Are there any further questions with respect to the document? I mean, hear what we're being told. There's a limit to what can be changed. Oh, did you wish to speak? Oh, sorry. And then did you still have something, Bill? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Worsnop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think when I look at the prioritisation and where everything's fallen out, it would have been awesome to have all the number ones at the top and then cascading down. Maybe when this comes back, it could be just in order to make a bit more sense of it a bit more easily. But if I do go and find the first equal 3, safety in schools, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think that says, oh yay, that is something that you would hope would fall out at the top, right? And then you follow down and you can kind of work your way through, and I think that broadly we can see that it's working. My question is around how we attribute the problem statement scores. Who decides that? Because is it subjective? Is it somebody just has a bit of a stab at it? Or is there a breakdown of specific, like I can see the definition up here, but again, that is still something where it would probably depend an awful lot on judgment.
Yes, it is. It is designed to be quite, just a simple approach. We didn't define each scoring. It was sort of, the idea was just a high, medium, low, and to give a feel for it. That might be something, if we felt like it wasn't coming out as it should, or as you would expect it, then yeah, that could be something we could look at.
I
as a
guess
definition for each one.
My question is there an ability in there for our community to influence that? So we've heard Colleen, heard our friend here, talking about, you know, different perceptions of maybe it's access, maybe it's safety, and
Two things we've heard this morning.
exactly. So to what extent is it purely a council reasonably dry process, and to what extent does our community get to influence where that score fits? If they perceive that one of these fits somewhere differently and it deserves a higher weighting on safety, is that something that then moves it up the categories? Or do we have the ability to make it responsive like that?
Through you, Madam Chair, a lot of that's part of how we consult with our community around our prioritisation and where our spends are going to be. So a lot of it is if there are projects, and we highlight projects through our long-term plan and our regional land transport plan communication with our community, we highlight projects to say, these are the ones that are going to come through based on their current scores and those things. And that's where the example I used previously around a footpath may end up coming back absolutely overwhelmingly through the community consultation around a safety issue or something like that, and all of a sudden jumps further back up the list because we go back and reprioritise based on the feedback that we get from our community. So it's very much through that process we start to see where these scores are, and we assess them based on these things. The best example from the last long-term plan was the Valley Road footpath that runs through the back there, and the extensions that were put there. That came in higher after community consultation because the council had overwhelming feedback from those residents in the community that they needed to see that footpath sooner rather than later based on their feedback and experiences of that area.
Thank you. Councillor Burdett, did you have something? Great. Thank you.
And I've added a sixth. Tell me if I'm wrong. Now, develop an EV overlay in relation to the regional transport plan that's in response to planning. Is that timely or not?
I thought the comment was in relation to the strategic framework, not the plan yet.
Can I test something?
Legally, we are obliged to work with you. That's why I haven't.
Absolutely, and we were going to. Can I tell you, Ms. Kohiri and I are on the case down this end of the table. And we were suggesting that number 2 became approves the draft strategic framework presented, subject to the inclusion of a cultural hapu overlay.
Could I just point out with the delay or the pushing out of the timeframes, we do have the opportunity to look at these again. If you would prefer to, not approve the strategic framework now and retain it draft, I don't see any issue with our timeframes based on that.
We've dwelt and discussed on it long enough today, Madam Chair.
I agree with Mr. Burdett. We need to keep the ball rolling.
Yes.
And what's been added to those resolutions or recommendations would do the job. Because the
draft.
framework will lead to the plan itself and what permeates through the plan.
So we amend, I think the tidiest way, if you're happy, we won't add 6, but we'll amend 2 to say, which is the same as what begins there at 2 in our agenda, and you're happy to move, I think. Approves the draft strategic framework presented, subject to the inclusion of a cultural hapu iwi overlay. Are you moving that, Councillor Burdett? Yes. Is there a second?
I'll second that if I can.
Thank you. It's a crazy process, Mr. Jupiter. You can come and you can have a whole lot of things to say, but you don't get to move or second anything. Good try. Yes, yes, the whole lot with that amended. Seconded, Councillor Worslock. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary carried. Thank you very much. Thank you, council officers. Now we move to the speed management item, page 28, and it's item 10.2, which might address some of the issues that were raised with us earlier today. We've got a lot of paper here, and I trust everyone to read it. So should we cut to the chase, please? summarise it, and then we'll have questions. Thank you.
If, first of all, I just want to know Tina Middlemas just for the hard work she's done. So with the last LTP, we started getting a lot of comments, but they were quite sporadic about speed. So this is what this, instead of looking at it by a case individual road, we actually look at the district, urban and rural. We've deliberately kept out the urban area because we know there's a lot of complications with that, but we'll get there. And so the report, as we start the strategy, we start getting a strategic look at how we manage it. And things, for instance, all our unsealed roads are 100 kilometres an hour. We know that most people physically don't travel that. They physically don't, but that's discussion, it's what do we do? So instead of looking at, and then you start moving around areas around schools and you don't look at one school, you look at the whole district, you start looking at that. And the CBD is another instance. So this is what we're proposing. And so we're suggesting that we start compiling some maps, and the reason we've put the two townships there was just a glimpse of what potentially could be happening. We're saying for today's committee that we're going to recommend. That's just to give you a glimpse of what potential changes could happen. And at this stage, staff will be looking at more in terms of going quite hard in terms of the speed reductions, and then we'll start looking at whether that's too hard. So the idea is let's give some maps so people can see it, then they can go out with council's long-term plan. But we suggest what we'd like to do is start bringing that information to this committee to have a look, and then we can work through areas. So that's what the recommendation will start for today.
Question? Oh, Councillor Cranston, thank you.
Thanks. No, that's good, thanks. Even something as simple as the definition of a school, you find most schools will have at least two roads and some even three.
Yeah.
So, whether we're talking outside schools or around schools. So that will come through the mapping, I guess.
Exactly. It's around the schools, which we need quite a lot of guidance from the committee, because that area can start expanding pretty big. Certainly when we've got up to 50, 60 schools in the district, and you'll find by default you could be looking at a big 30k, potentially 40k area over the bulk of the network if it's not managed right.
Yeah, it sounds like there's been a little bit of consideration about what they do in Australia, but it hasn't gained much traction. When you're in Australia, they'll have time limits of speed limits around schools, so they'll change all the time. And I think, it did say there that the variable speed limit noted as RCAs have not been able to implement. So I guess it's been identified that is quite problematic. Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we have the flashing lights, because once the school's finished at night and during school holidays, well, what's the point of having the 30k? The speed limit at that time? So those are the things we should be having those discussions.
But outside that variability, what's the period of school holidays? So if you've got a permanent, could that lift during a school holiday period when you've got 6 or 7 weeks where it's not needed?
Yes, and that's why we try, the flashing lights, we try and adjust that. So we work with the schools that once the schools are gone, then it basically goes back to the normal speed limit. But those are the discussions. Some of these could be, if you're looking beyond the school area, well, you may be like Hamilton have gone, they've kept it at 40k, full stop. So those are the things that the committee has to think about.
Yeah, it is quite important to get that clarity, because even though the cars go in one gateway over school, quite often the pedestrian access could be at quite a few different points.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Herbert. And then I'll come to you, Ms. Bay.
Can you tell me what the difference for speed limits between rural schools and city schools is?
So some of our rural schools are in, at the moment, 100k, 100 kilometre areas. And so by default, we can't lower them. I think it's more by, Mr. Broderick may be able to confirm that, by a certain amount, and sometimes only up to 80 k's. If we're in 100, it can go to either 80 or 70 a maximum, for the temporary. So this is why the legislation, we're waiting for the Ministry of Transport to bring that policy in. If they say the policy is in a 100 kilometre area, you should go 60. But this is, like the Poverty Bay Flats, the committee may have a discussion, well, whether 100 kilometres is appropriate for that area at the moment. And then that would give us an opportunity to reduce the speed at that school. But there's the pros and cons. So you have to make sure, like freight, okay, you know, if your main roads, you still want people to travel, you know, as efficiently and legally as possible. So you have to balance it. The main routes you may want to still keep at 50. You know, that's just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Everyone's thinking, the issue with Stout Street, does that come within this? And it's the one where we're getting a lot bit of noise lately.
They've suggested or asked for traffic calming measures, and that's probably something we can talk about for the noting report, but the network operating framework. But they've asked for more hard physical structures when there's a speed limit.
Ms. Bate, thank you.
So we're very supportive of the work that you're doing on speed management, and we're really pleased to see the intent that you want to move quickly on this. There's a couple of really important things to be aware of. The new rule hasn't yet been passed and is not due to pass until sometime perhaps in the first quarter of next year. So these can't come into effect until the rule is passed, and there is still a chance that the rule could change. So I just think you need possibly to be a little bit cautious about going out to consultation when there's the chance that that rule may change. We simply don't have we don't control that. That's a decision for Parliament. So I think we totally encourage the work you're doing and support it. And similarly, ideally, we'd like to be doing this in partnership with you, because you can't do the state highways. We need to do the state highways. And that's just, obviously, we've got a whole country to do. And so just ensuring that our processes can talk to each other is probably quite helpful. There is quite a long time frame to bring this in. So we've got 3 years. And we know that many communities want to move quickly on their schools, and the rule will set new mandatory changes to be put in place in that implementation time frame. So we absolutely support it, but we do think you need to take care around the fact that the rule hasn't yet been passed, and that it could still change. And we do want to keep working with you as we work through, so both the state highways and the local roads have the same framing around them, and they make sense to the people using them. And I think the other thing is that the changes to the rule will actually make it a lot easier to make sensible changes than the current settings do. So there's a lot of really positive stuff that doing this planning, thinking about the whole network and things like those gravel roads being at 100 k's when they're really never going to be safe and appropriate speeds for those roads. So there's a lot of really great things, and it's really awesome to see you picking that up and planning to implement it. So thank you.
Councillor Worsnop.
Yeah, I wanted to credit the paper as well. There is some really good stuff in it. I did pick up, I had a question, is it possible to be an early adopter of a draft rule? That's pretty much answered that question for me. It's kind of proceed with caution and possibly not too quickly. I think broadly, it does seem like a much more agile proposal that allows the community and probably the country to reflect much more consistently what the outcomes the community is trying to achieve and the council are trying to achieve. I did pick up one thing that I thought we should probably submit feedback on, because it's broken schools into essentially two zones, 50 k's and 100 k's, and designated 30 and 60 is the level that it would drop to. But we have schools that are in 60 k zones. There's, that's over 50, sure, it would just stay at 60. So I think probably it needs to be able to be a bit more flexible than just either below or over 50 k zones. And I see that we've kind of applied this proposal in the two townships. And while I thought Matawai made a lot of sense, I was pretty alarmed with Te Araroa, because I sort of thought, holy crap, is anybody going to abide by a rule that's dropped from 70 to 30? It is mentioned somewhere here in terms of, the ability to get uptake requires that it's proportionate. And did the community feel that 30 was proportionate when there have not been any serious incidents in 10 years? And I think there were only, was it 2 or 3 that involved speed? And in 10 years, that's kind of a long time. So I think just a little bit of caution, because if you applied that rule to the city, we might not get above 20 anywhere, you know. So just being a little bit cautious about how we apply it and making sure that it's got a really rigorous sense check over the top of it. But broadly, I think a positive thing to be trying to move towards. But I support Emma just in terms of being cautious that we don't jump the gun and then have to try and retrieve the bullets before they hit anything.
I would just like to ask our police colleague, oh, sorry, I'll come to you next if you don't mind. So I'm looking at the bottom of page 240, which says the RCA must set the speed limit outside a rural school to 60. And we have to remember these will not, the regulation will then be monitored by the police. So, and what resources are you going to have the resources to monitor this? It's all very well to put it in place and for us to feel we've done a good job. But who's going to be there to keep an eye on the 30K and Te Aurora, as Ms. Woolsnott's just mentioned?
Thank you. The resources from a strictly road policing sense have not increased. There is no increase in those, but there are the general policing also have the ability to enforce speed. So we can get and do have the opportunity to provide them with the tools to do that. Most of our rural police officers are already trained in it. And sometimes it's just a matter of putting the resource there. So the rural officers that are out there can already manage their speed, and then we would support them with the specialist roads policing branch as well.
Anecdotally, we do have a number of references made to heavy transport and speed it goes through our townships. I'll just use Tolaga Bay. So we do need to think about, you know, if we're going to put these rules in place, which absolutely, ideally, you know, exactly the right thing to do, but it is important that they be monitored, isn't it?
Yeah, truly. And in fact, there is a lot of technology out there now that assists the heavy motor industry to regulate themselves on their speed. So they've got their own GPS mechanisms and they can manage their own drivers. And in a lot of cases, they do that very well.
Thank you. Further questions from the paper? I'm just going back to your point, and I'll ask Ms. Cohu to expand on it, but it would seem to me this is not going to move fast because we're going to take it to consultation preparatory to our regional transport plan in the beginning of the year, or else our LTP. So we wouldn't have been going out to consult on this immediately.
No, but we would be starting to. No, but we would be starting to potentially bring potential maps to this committee for draft maps, and I think that should be undertaken with the provisos that we've had, and hopefully we'll be getting some feedback from the table saying yes, we don't think that will work, or we think that might.
Well, the next meeting's not till December, so
yeah,
plenty of time. So I think you will be bringing back maps.
Yep, the city might be a bit difficult, but I'm sure some of the rural townships we could start there.
We need to have the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a lot of good information in here. Thank you.
Just as a example, in Wellington, so a lot of the villages in Wellington, the suburbs, have had 30-kilometre limits for some time now. And we certainly have seen speeds come down, and we've just implemented 30K limits through the whole of the CBD. And we're in the, I think, education phase of policing on that. But it is noticeable that speeds have dropped, and we're seeing an environment that is safer for pedestrians and cyclists. So while lots of people, I think if you did that 10 years ago, there would have been a lot of resistance. It certainly seems to be, there was no public outcry or significant concern. And we've done a lot of work where we have dropped speed limits in other areas and on open roads. And despite people's concerns, you're only seeing very small drops in actual journey times and so on. So there's a lot of evidence starting to emerge that can help to alleviate people's fears about the impact of lower speeds. And we know, and you can see it in all the documents, that those lower speeds lead to vastly reduced trauma in any accident that occurs. So they are really effective mechanisms for us to use.
Ms Herbert, my apology, I did say you were next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just once again, in reference to the spatial plan, Tarawhiti 2050, we note the aspiration to increase active travel by 40% by 2050. And I don't know that we have captured that so much in here. In planning for safe road speeds, we need to be forward thinking, you know, moving into the future rather than basing a plan on what has been or what is. So just something to consider going forward. I don't know that we've captured that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Can I just pick up on that? I agree. I think that speed kind of needs to work in tandem with the kind of infrastructure we're providing at the same time. I know a recent sort of council meeting, we had a lot of discussion about scooters and skateboards on footpaths, and it's all well and good to provide one part of the equation, which is, you know, more safety because of lower speeds, but there's a lot else that we can do as well. And it is a bigger picture, I think. There's probably tying them together is what will lead to the acceptance that you're talking about. If the environment is conducive to this picture, then people don't see an issue with it. And I think it's the implementation, isn't it?
Councillor Burdett.
As to adherence to what we're recommending. You know, and we'll find out when we go to long-term plan consultation. I don't know who did the consultation. It wasn't me in Te Aroa, but I can just imagine the reaction from the majority in terms of going from 70 to 30. But that's only one example I use. I mean, the rest, they're not bad. However, the adherence to those recommendations is another thing.
It's a policing matter, that's what we just said.
Yes, I know.
To move our agenda along, ladies and gentlemen, the recommendation is to identify the preferred option, and option one being to do nothing yet and wait to align with the next LTP while continuing to field customer service complaints, or to be early adopters. But I think what we do want, I can't find the other option, that we do want council officers to continue to work on this, so you bring back some plans and timeframes to the next meetings. That's what I'm saying, and it says preferred option one, and I find the options are on page under item 15 on page 32. So we really, which is actually A, I think. So I think we can take out option one, and we have the agree that council officers develop the final draft speed management plan to align with the long-term plan consultation process. Isn't that clear enough? Thank you. Agrees that council, taking out those other words, agrees that council officers develop a final draft, being it the fact that it is a draft, speed management plan to align with the long-term plan consultation process. And that means other material will come back to us intermittently until such time as it's ready for LTP next year. Are we happy with that? Would someone move, please? Thank you, Councillor. And seconded, Councillor Cranston. Move, Councillor Worsnop. Seconded, Councillor Cranston. Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Are we getting a fresh pot of coffee? Does anyone know? Is it turned up? Let's take 5 minutes, because I realise once we get into the next paper, it might take a while. So there's tea and coffee just down there. Feel free to have a fresh drink. Straight back to the table. How's that? Thank you.
which is keeping stock off the road and safely restrained where they should be.
Between here and Napier, there's a ton of goats on the road. They're all over the place. I don't know if they're wild or they're farmed. What's
They're
happening there?
wild. They're
What's
wild.
going on there? Do you know much about that?
So we do regular culls up there, don't we, Ollie?
We used to do an annual cull, but by the time they get there, they've all disappeared. They're fairly savvy goats and they're all feral.
Well, they've all had babies and they're double the number.
Yeah.
I just think I want to speak to this road, keeping the roads safe, but we don't seem to have any of these wonderful new signage yet. That's on the report wandering stock. I've just asked Councillor Burdett if any of this signage has appeared up the coast. So I've had a number of submissions made to me and they've been taken up, and I completely support the fact that landowners need to keep their fences safe and farmers need to keep their fences safe. Dare I say, mainly farmers do, and it tends to be more livestock, lifestyle and villages where we're having the difficulties. But there's been, without getting into the detail, one particular animal that's been put off the road 3 or 4 times in the last week in Tukumara Bay. Well, I just think we need to toughen up, and that needs to be taken to account. And actually, the process that used to exist, where you pay a fee to get it back, or it's sold to defray expenses. We just need to expect people to look after their animals and keep them off the road. And if they don't, then the consequences need to be a bit tougher than just disappearing off the road for one night and they're back there tomorrow. I've got someone reporting to me every time this animal is on the road, and you know, we just hope that we don't end up with a tragic accident out of it. But it brings me to think about, which I'm sure some of our gentlemen over here know, we had a process of fencing roads, didn't we? And we had some hearings on it some time ago, and it never actually got implemented for some intervention by NZTA. So I thought, in conjunction with all of this, might be a really good opportunity for you to look that up, Ms. Spate, and see where that got to. That was a big piece of work that we did with respect to stock on council roads and stock on state highways. And then, and I particularly remember because we sat as a hearing when this council was sitting in the Cosmopolitan Club while this building was being built. So I think we need to dust that off and see what's holding that up, please.
Madam Chair, that's not just the only I spoke to him. I know she wants to go, but
why do you have
it's a bigger issue than this. The state highway is still leaks, like I said, out of the rivers. We were never able to complete the fencing program. That's an issue. The other one for me is I can't understand the Transport Agency's objection to a bylaw within this place and for themselves, and all of the stock, the horses that are grazing on the tied to the side of the road, some of them with long leads that they could stand in the middle of the road, and yet this is perfectly legal. Perfectly legal.
No, it's not.
Well, it is. It is. Otherwise, the police
again,
would be doing something about it. They're not.
There's one other thing before you leave. We haven't quite got to this part of your presentation. Oh, it's up there now. Another thing that's been raised time and time again with NZTA with respect to the littering. Can we please have some of these great signs? Because I was in the Bay of Plenty a couple of weeks ago and they've got them already, and we've had numerous letters to the editor, etc., but we still don't have any in our region, and the roadsides are a filthy mess. Councillor Cranston will support that. He's written letters to the editor and raised it in this forum as well.
So we are developing some new material for roadside littering, so we will be looking at that. And again, this is another example of something that we'd rather see stopped at the cause rather than have to go out there and clean up. And look, we will be absolutely clear the safety of our workers on the roadside is absolutely critical. We had 3 workers killed in the Bay of Plenty. And so we should not have schools going along the side of an open road picking up rubbish. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, and we understand that.
We really need to look after them. We really want people not to litter. And our crews, when they're out there doing work, they will pick up litter as they can, but we want to prioritise where it's
Can we have some of these signs like other people have got them, please?
Yeah, we're working through that, and we are getting some new signs.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, I mean, the signs are great, but I don't think they cleans the road up at all. So what is the process of when road is actually diabolical of getting it cleaned up.
And it's scheduled in as part of the work program, but again, if it's not a safety issue, we will prioritise to safety. And that's, you know, we don't have enough money to do everything we can on the network all of the time. So that is a challenge for all of us.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I was actually thinking about doing a bit of road clearing myself, and then I read this and thought, oh, that's not that's going to be frowned on.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I do have to go and
Yeah.
catch the plane, but I do want to just acknowledge the amazing work that both the council staff have been doing and our teams have been doing through that weather event. And since then, we've got some challenging sites. We all know where they are, and there's been a fantastic job. Initial assessment was it was going to be a much worse event than it was in the end, but it obviously still has caused quite a bit of disruption and quite a huge number of sites that have required remediation. So a really important piece of work. And this one, I know Pat's been very, very keen to see us taking action to improve the roadside safety and the environment at Makarori. So great to see that we're working together on that. That was a late addition.
I was going to say, that's not in here. It is disgusting, absolutely disgusting, the degradation that's happened at Makarori. But I understand your officers are working to get some limiting of the number of access ways onto that part of the beach. Thank you very much. We're sorry you need to go because it's important to have your contribution.
Yeah,
so I just move the receipt of your report.
Thank you.
I'll move and Councillor Burdett second the report, which is a recommendation on page 210. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. I was going to invite Mr. Postings to sit at the table, but it looks like Mr. Postings is leaving. I see, I see. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presence.
Thank you.
Right, we'll go back in our agenda. We need to go back to item 10.2, which is just to adopt the governance work plan, and I knew I'd read it, and it's actually there for adoption and for the benefit of those who aren't normally around the table. Once the work plan has been adopted, it's on page 132, it becomes the front end of the agenda, and you can measure our timelines against it. So it's just when the tasks will become before this committee. You're moving, Councillor Burdett, and a seconder, please. Thank you, Councillor Walton. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. So we're jumping all over the place. 134, the road safety update. Thank you very much. Who's Ms. Akarangi? Thank you, Ms. Akarangi. That's great. Oh, you've got, yes, we've got Donna. Thank you. We've all read the paper, or those who've received it haven't. I have to apologise to the gentleman at the end of the table who didn't get the agenda. Is there anything, would you like to, oh, you haven't got it either in front of you. Do you want to pull out anything particularly and raise it, or just take it as read and comment on anything that others wish to raise?
So good afternoon, everybody. Apologies for Di Akarangi. She's away at the moment, so I'm stepping in for her. I suppose the only real items are due the impacts from COVID-19, particularly with our Ngā Arapai driving courses. So that was a little bit disappointing, but unfortunately beyond everyone's control. But apart from that, unless I have questions, I'm happy to table it.
Question about that. Given the scale of the project, like you've got a reasonable chunk of people, are we not able to contract somebody to deliver specifically in, as part of the program, the actual testing component? I know a lot of these people will, like the report details how tricky it is for some of them to get to a testing, outfit at short notice. Surely if we've gone to all the rest of the effort of getting them upskilled, we really don't want them falling down at the last hurdle. Have we explored that and just not found anybody, or is it not something that the actual outfits let us do?
You're talking about the driver training.
Yeah,
But there is a mechanism. I think REAP has a contract, And they do bring the young people to, well, they don't need to be young, they bring the drivers to the city for their training and for their final.
It says in here that they're being told like the day before, if they can't make it.
So through the chair, so what has currently been happening is that REAP and Ngātapai do all the training and the mentoring, and then as the students, they actually have to be tested by the VTNZ. Yes, that's the blockage at the moment. So in our region, a lot of the testers are at 65 or plus year age group, which with COVID they weren't able to come in. So that's been an issue. I believe VTNZ have put a plan in place. They've brought in 2 new inspectors for the next 4-week period to try and reduce that. However, that's had a massive, big impact from last financial year. There is still quite a large delay in time. So even with these 2 new inspectors, hopefully it'll be a faster process, but we'll just have to wait and see at this point.
Oh, sorry, Andy, can I just finish there? Is there something like where we've got all this redeployment going on, should we be looking at investing some of that in upskilling and making sure that we have got capacity locally for something that's so critical for a region with so many roads?
That would be great, but I don't believe that's in our jurisdiction, to be fair. That's with VTNZ.
Councillor Cranston.
I had curious concern as well, because the way I read it, it was more around students. I mean, we're talking about VTNZ turning away students for non-payment when the service provider had paid. And VTNZ also contacting students the night before with a text and expecting them to be there the next day for testing. So it sounded like they needed to look at their processes in that sense. So, but another couple of things from that, the first page there where you've got your safety priorities, I mean, most of the priorities are quite straightforward, but when you get to the safety priorities being, what page is it? 1, 3, 4?
Your page, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, just 1, 3, 4. So you've got the, and 1, 3, 5. The road safety priorities are quite straightforward, where you'd be looking at alcohol, drugs, seatbelts and things like that. But then the priority groups, I guess you get target priority groups for a reason to actually deal with those groups. And the groups are male, Māori, and 15 to 50 years. So it seems like Pākehā women over 50 are the only ones not excluded as a priority group. So what are you trying to specify there?
They've given up drugs by then.
you know, it seems you would make a priority group so you could do something about it, but you actually targeted just about everyone there. And 15 to 50 is such a wide grouping.
Through you, Chair, I was involved with the priority setting. It is male Māori aged between 15 to 50 is who we are targeting. So it's all of those things. It's not one in particular, and it's because they are absolutely disproportionately represented in some of our worst statistics on the road and accidents, and I'm sure police can back that with me.
Yeah, so what is 15 to 50? What does that mean? Anyone in that bracket?
It's
the way you bullet pointed it.
Māori male, age 15 to 50 are who we see in our drink driving stats, recidivist drink driving, drug driving, high-speed crashes. Those are the criteria for our...
Yeah. And the other one was the Whakamahia education program. It's targeting recidivists, but it's voluntary. I mean, if you're trying to get these recidivists, do something about them, and then they can volunteer whether to do it or not. I mean, that's not our issue. It's kind of a...
But it is quite amazing how many volunteers we've had. We've been oversubscribed since the programme started. So it's grown exponentially. Unfortunately, we had to cancel last one because of COVID stuff. But yeah, originally it was a prevention technique. So in other words, we were targeting people who were under no obligation to attend those crashes. Look, you've been caught 3 times or more, and we'd like to bring you along and just give you, and we've turned quite a lot of people around. I think the success rate is in the high 90s, as in we haven't caught them again since. So it's not a massively accurate data, but over time, we would hope that we're getting more and more success.
If you had a recidivist that was kept offending, could you compel them to go on?
Yes, well, we can't, but probation can. So if they are on probation, the probation service can make almost anything compulsory, and they do look at that side of it.
Thanks.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I want to acknowledge the writer of this report, Diane Hakurangi, and also acknowledge what's in this report and congratulate your people and particularly her in the work that she's done to not only put this together, but the information that's in it. I'm very impressed with the tangata whenua engagement, and it really provides a model or a template at a very specific level, which is road safety, for how our plan can be developed in terms of transport, regional transport generally. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Have you heard from Diane on any news? Well, we'll leave it at that.
Are there any further questions from that report? For noting.
I'd also just like to congratulate everyone on the amazing work around the schools. It is greatly appreciated. So yeah, well done.
Thank you. So move Councillor Burdett, seconded Councillor Wilson, that the paper be noted. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. The evolution of the one, thank you very much. The evolution of the one network roading classification on 145, thank you.
Thank you. I'll take the report as read. Just if you're wondering what the importance of this is, what they've found, a lot of transport planners around the country, is they're actually finding that roads just aren't for places for people to travel. People are doing speed limits, they're doing traffic calming, and so what they're trying to do is thinking, what does this? It's just not a road to travel; it's a space. And so what they're trying to do is come up with areas that the community and can take this. Stout Street's a popular one, and in terms of, is that a residential feel? What is it? What's the purpose of it? And it's more that okay, it's starting to come that this way. So it's trying to link up all those, can we call it, different streams of different actions, and actually saying what's the purpose of the street. So it's just. But the reason we also brought it is that eventually that's where investment and money is going to go. Okay, so that's why we've started to pick up an early phase. So it's just early phases at this moment. I can't say too much other than that. We'll just take it as read.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, table on page 171, when I first sort of looked at it, I thought, oh, that's not actually achieving employment was a major criteria there, and with employment getting new recruits into the company. So when I went through the companies there, it seemed that one had another 5, one another 3, and 4 had another 1.
I think you're in the next paper.
Am I? Sorry.
Yeah, we're just on the one roading network, which is just a few papers for information. We'll be with you in a moment. So the recommendation on the one roading network is that, as Mr. Hadfield has just said, it's just an update of the philosophy behind funding roads and what roads are to be used for in the future. So it's a noting report. Is there someone? Moved Councillor Burdett, seconded Councillor Worsnott. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. So we're now on 153, and I think that might be where your comments come from,
Yes,
Councillor Cranston.
Right.
Page 170 something.
It's 171. So it's got a table there, new recruits by company, and I was a bit concerned that the new recruits numbers seem quite low, but we read further into the paper, there was companies there that were doing quite significant recruiting, but they weren't on that table. Things like Downer had an indication that they had 13 new recruits, and then there was Cranswick's, which are also building up on their operation. So yeah, it's just the whole intention of the PGF was to get employment and recruiting, getting new people on jobs and that. So I just didn't think that table was telling the whole story when I first read it.
Mr. Wilson might comment on that. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, that was the results to date for back in up to, I think it was 30 June that we had to present. So we've smashed those targets completely now. So we're well past, I think, over 120 staff that we've brought into roading now across our heavy metalling, our TRIP, and then our provincial growth funding. So we've definitely hit all the targets that we were needed to as part of what we've done. So that was just her being picked up at that time, and it was reflective of the contracts and where they were in the stage of onboarding as well.
Yeah, there's really good numbers coming through the training side of it. Is it kind of looking like those big numbers are going to have positions?
So with the training that's coming through, we're working really hard with our contractors around picking up, so each of their contracts, sorry for the committee, each of the contracts that we let under our roading funding at the moment has targets for new employees or trainees to be taken on for a minimum of a 12-week period, and they come in to work with those companies, and it's part of the contracts that we have with them. So we've taken on everyone that we can through that process. Not everybody makes it through the training for different reasons. Some people move away, some people aren't able to complete the training. So we're absolutely picking up everyone that we can that's coming out the end of that.
Just the other comment was that it was 2 million tendering per recruit. It seemed like a lot per recruit.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's an absolute minimum that we have to do for our spend on what it is. That's more of a placeholder indication to industry around our expectation for that. Their contracts have far more detail inside them, so that was just for a PGF one. Remember, a lot of these projects, we have to be careful around existing workforce and throwing new people at them, because industry does have, it takes time to get people up to specialist skills that we have in roading construction, but then also we have number of industry are looking for work now due to different downturns for COVID across the country, contractors coming in, so we are having to balance that requirement and making sure we're not displacing people we shouldn't as part of that too.
Thank you. Councillor Worsnop.
So it's really cool to have this detail on the progress. We've got a few here that are scoping, I suppose, business cases. What sort of reception are we expecting for those, given that we already have obviously been allocated quite a big pile? And
what page, Councillor Worsnop?
This is generally, I'm looking at all of the, I'm at 178, 9, 80.
164 on those pages onwards.
Sorry, I'm just looking at my note. One of them was like 68,000 for a business case, that sort of crap. Sorry, I'm trying to find it now.
Oh, okay. So, but to reference it, it's in the
yes,
the pages of the
business
case.
Yes,
from page 162 onwards.
Oh, 194 is the page. Found it. Sorry, busy writing things down as well. So yeah, obviously the scope of that project is probably going to be enormous. That would definitely fit into significant, would it? Like where do these things fit in with the bits of paper that we were looking at earlier? Or do they just appear once we have a business case? Just I'm a bit new to this, so that work.
So through you, Madam Chair, when we were given our provincial growth funding, a number of the projects that we put forward were not at the, to quote the new term, shovel-ready phase. So we had to investigate those further. So when we had our money allocated from central government for us, whether it was through provincial growth funding or if it was from NZTA, some of them we could start straight away. Some of them we needed to prove the business case to then unlock that investment. So when our funding was allocated, we had a reserve set aside for Tairāwhiti for us that should our business cases meet the required thresholds, NZTA approve them, they would then be eligible to be drawn down, for want of a better term, from that reserve that was set aside by Cabinet. And that was $130 million that was set aside, but that was for between us and NZTA because they had some as well. So for these, some of them have investment there ready to go. They just need for us to prove the business cases to then be able to draw down on them. Others would go into our regional land transport bid around having to put them into our 3-year funding cycle, depending on where they are. We are working through the a number of these projects, and they will be having announcements in future dates as to whether or not they're successful, but that's something for a later date and for people far higher up the food chain than I to announce.
So when do they appear in the improvement activity prioritisation for projects table? The one with all the colours.
If they haven't yet, we were just waiting for if they were going to be approved for funding.
Right.
And then if they are, then we can put them in there. So
how do you get onto that list? Is that stuff that's been sitting there for a long time and it just kind of reshuffles and some things get knocked off? But yeah, I'm trying to understand how things end up in the priorities list when we've actually got some bigger stuff that's actually spinning away on the side.
So about 4 years ago, we worked very closely with a rather large number of stakeholders with NZTA to develop up our ITPP, which was our Integrated Transport Priority Plan. And we worked with industry stakeholders, ourselves, around how we would put in forward all of the routes that we needed increased investment on based on our asset data, but then also based on importance and significance to industry, our community, connecting communities, all of those things. That created the first list of what we had that was funded by the Provincial Growth Fund. So when the PGF was announced, we literally gave them that list and said, we want all of these funded. We then negotiated with them how many they were going to fund, which started this, which is what we're talking about in this report here. This is those ones from that piece of work that was done.
Is it particularly related to the improvement activity list?
They should be very closely aligned too, because a lot of the roads that we're talking about here are roads that we talked about in our RLTP and in around our long-term planning investment as well. So for the likes of Tauwhare Parae, for example, is always in our RLTP. So it was also very high up the list of prioritisation for funding through the Provincial Growth Fund. So there are some that we had to go through our long-term plan funding and then show how this was additional investment over what we could afford, even though. And for something like Tauwhare, Dave Hadfield will be doing a capital big job on there. Donna will be doing maintenance, and the team will also be doing provincial growth funding. So 3 different sites, 3 different funding things, but all you care about is that we're fixing the road. So it's really convoluted in the background as to how it's funded and how it's prioritised.
Do you reckon there's a way that we could see it in this? Because there's stuff that's missing from this, those pages that we talked about earlier. If you look at that and you didn't read this later paper that we're now talking about, you wouldn't know that that was happening. You'd miss actually what is an enormous part of the picture.
Absolutely, and we take that on board. I think part of our reporting back as we refine the list for work that's going to come in through our asset management plan and our infrastructure strategy, we'll be showing some roads, by the investment they've had over the last 3 years, will be dropping down these lists at the same time as the improvements are completed and as we see how those roads are responding to what's going on as well. As you said, it's the first cut.
Sorry.
Just for you, Madam Chair, just in regards to the Provincial Growth Fund, we had an initial meeting with Emma prior to our hui today, and she talked about how Cabinet, in regards to that fund, kind of sets its own rules. Do they dictate who you get to do the job? Do they say, use these guys here? And as I understand it, there are local contractors that you use. Is there any issue around that?
So through you, Madam Chair, they don't dictate who we use. We go through our own tendering process. What we have done is Council changed its procurement policy late last year around how we tender for these things. So very much our council's about supporting our local economy, and that's a very heavy weighting that comes through in the way that we do our tenders. We also have different criterias now around how you support the local economy yourself if you're getting a contract with us, how you're training your staff, how are you contributing to the local community, those things. So there's a lot of that in our new procurement, the way that we do things.
Thank you.
Yes, we are. We are, in terms of the framework, it's not that we haven't been collecting all the data, it's just that it hasn't been, formally said what we're monitoring, when, and where the information is coming from. So it's quite hard to track and have consistent reporting. So that's what we'll be working on with the new framework, is to actually have it set out. And there are various levels of monitoring. I don't want to get into too much detail, but obviously NZTA have a benefits framework, so they've got a set of measures. There's the GPS has objectives to measure.
We're giving the data to state that it's usable relative to what else.
Yeah.
Yeah, Wiggins Bridge, it's the abutments, and so we're just working with the contractor to sort that out. But long term, we're going to have a discussion about the bridge, because all we seem to be doing is repairing one part and we're transferring it to another. So it's
How far away is the repairs? Because I mean, it has a lot of pressure on that bridge for a very busy access road to both transport farming and the forestry industry. So, you know, we've been talking for a while.
Yeah. We've just done the understructure by Dave Taylor, and we've got the abutment to do. So so within the next 2 months, it should be sorted.
This has been troubling me for a little while because of lack of attention to jobs. Is it correct, and either Dave can answer through you, Madam Chair, is it correct, apart from getting a quote, that we have to supply a business plan to the transport agency before they get approval? We get approval to fund it.
Through you, Madam Chair, it depends on what it is for. So at the moment, we have our budgets that we are spending against that already have the business cases in place, and that is what we're reporting on in the paper around the provincial growth funding that we're talking to and the work that we have now. For any new work, we will need a business case over certain thresholds. For things like the flood damage that we have across the network from the June-July events, absolutely it has to go to NZTA for them to tell us whether they're going to fund it before we work on it, because they have to approve the fix. Because the last thing we're going to do is do a fix that they're not going to fund.
That's what I mean. What's the minimum threshold? Sorry, Madam Chair.
So for flood works, we put everything through that is from the event that is classified as part of that for them to check. So if we have lost water tables, if we've lost sections of the road, we go through and open the road, then we stop while we wait to find out where the funding level sits and see if we can afford to fund it as council as well, because there's more damage out there that we can afford to fund. So part of that is then around how do we look at the fixes, where's the money coming from, and then what are the designs for them. So there is a delay for things like that before we're able to do any of the work on them.
Thank you.
I mean, just one further question, since this is a paper, which I guess, you know, is what we're here for, is the question of the accountability. The inner harbour development, if I read the sums, it looks to me like we've got 500,000 non-spent, as at the bottom of page 1613. And if I go back to the previous page, there's a budget line, and then there's approved funding, some funding, and actual expenditure. So where's the 500,000 non-spent on the inner harbour? It's always a hot topic.
Through you, Madam Chair, as you're aware, we very much spent every single cent of that budget, so I think it's a mistake in the table. I'll get the team to check it.
I think that might just be the, yeah, sorry.
I just want to acknowledge that this is the last meeting that Ms. Cadbury will be here with us, and she's moving to Green Fields.
Thank you, everybody. So part of the Junies team is joining us this afternoon because we're going to show a PowerPoint presentation of some of the work that we've achieved in the last financial year, and I thought it was a great opportunity for the team members that are in-house at the moment for you to see their faces and acknowledge the hard work they do. So we have Falani, who's our Northern Network Manager, L'Oreal, who is our Network Technician, and Kelly, who has the daunting task of dealing with all our RFSs for Junies.
Did you say RFSs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Voting creates the most RFSs in this organisation, doesn't it?
it does. We get up to 400 a month. So we've got our report that we'll go through, and then there's a presentation to follow. Thank you. Oh, yep, we can do the.
Oh, sorry, you want to do the, okay, questions, fine, thank you.
24 walking and cycling consultations complete and positive. So I presume that's Kaiti School to Crawford Road and then down Crawford Road, and that's green lit, all go.
Yes, this week we just finalised the last bit of consultation, and so there's just some minor tweaks. We were just talking with the port, and they just wanted just with the gantry and just that interaction. You may notice there's actually some trucks that have been actually driving out and actually going across the other side of the road, and and so there's some small parts that the wharf are going to relocate the in and out and basically how they tag out. And so we've said we might even put a little, a mirror there for some of the truck drivers so they can actually, if there are some weak spots. But other than that, it's been all positive.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just had a question around the township upgrades. So they are, I'm reading from this, they're completed. Largely, I'm assuming if the Muriwai was largely focused on drainage, that Manatuki must have been up the rest of the budget. Is that safe to assume?
There were some carryovers.
Yeah,
we've still got to, with Manatuki, we've still got to go back and do a bit more consultation. So we've held that.
Because I know there were some pretty big dreams. And I know we have a pretty constrained budget, but yeah, I guess I was just wondering how much we got out of our 300,000.
Well, yeah, so all
any pictures up there?
drains and speed bumps. Yeah, that's one.
So we just thought we'd just give you some examples of the work that's been achieved, and I can see Campbell smiling down there. You must be really happy about the work that's been happening. And you can just see examples going forward. So Aerodrome Road was part of our PGF program. I think it was over $3 million worth of work on that road. These are the asphalt repairs that have been happening, and you can see well, I hope you've seen the night works that's occurring at the moment, so that's ongoing also. I think it's great that you can actually see the photos of while the contractors are in it and amongst it. So Glenroy Road was really damaged from some of the latest flood works as well. So these are sort of just temporary fixes. Yeah.
Has it been widened or is that just a photograph?
It was widened slightly because the road actually collapsed in the latest events. So those are sort of temporary repairs at the moment till we can hopefully get the funding from NZTA.
So there's been a few logistics. So we've actually had to organise contracts with direct supply with our quarry operators, and then we've gone to we've put tenders out for cartage or haulage. So we've got Mackay's and DeCosta's and Harrison. They're transporting us to site. So, and then we've got the Fultons and these other contractors that are physically doing the work. And so it's just managing the stockpile. So I was actually going to thank Emma for allowing us to put some of our stockpiles on the state highway. I mean, has certainly helped. So it's keeping up in the, we just want to make sure we don't slow down the big machine, and that's it just makes sure we're carting all the time. So
as long as they're not pilfering it.
Question around the needling. So I've had some unusual feedback, and I was actually out visiting someone up the Mangamaya Road, so I got to see what they were talking about. There's an insane amount of metal has gone on, like it's like 2 foot deep in places, and it services one farm. And I know that we want to do it, so we don't have to do it for a long time, but I just like, do we follow up and make sure that it's kind of gone where it's supposed to go?
yeah, that was the first case we had, because what we were wanting to do was be carting a lot, and we're trying to use some line stabilisation, and they were just, that was the first one off the block.
So it was intentional.
Yeah, but we were, because that's when the guy said, oops, and I didn't want to say it. We tried to do it in an area where we wouldn't get too much visibility. Want to try. So we did make it so that it would have been in an area quite far.
Use of the spec that the road's being built up now. So you can't just go on the grass verge to pass a car coming towards you where you live on a metal road. They've got this very good new surface, yeah, about so deep, and then the side of the road where you would have gone is not visible.
Yeah, exactly.
It's going to be interesting. We'll observe.
It's very welcome, don't get me wrong, very welcome, just as long as we've got some oversight to make sure
Yeah,
it's
If I just ask a couple of questions. That looks really impressive, the end result. In terms of monitoring the work,
Yes.
To ensure that the contractors do what they're required to do, who does that? Is that you folk?
We do. So part of, Falani's our Northern Network Manager, and then we have Daniel Thompson, who's our Western Network Manager, and L'Oreal and Hannah are our technicians. They actually go out on this, like for each network we have zoned areas. So there's 14 zones in total, and they do a weekly rotation zone by zone. And we're actually picking up lots of areas where there's extra work that is required to be done, which is great. And they audit and check for our team as well.
Yeah, and we've also got support from the CPS team that we've had to bring on because we realised it was just too big for the existing staff. But we wanted them also just to focus on the BAU, that's the program. And so that team will be helping us. Very good.
Apologies, I was just, I was referring to just our BAU, but yeah, Dave's quite right.
All right, thank you. My next question is, I'm assuming you don't need a resource consents or anything like that to do, say, a job like that that's up on the screen right now?
So when we're in an emergency event, we don't have to apply for consent at that point in time. It's a retrospective application following.
Which is understandable, yes.
Yes, but any work that is planned and we need a consent, yes, we do have to.
Disposal of spoil, yes, absolutely. But some of our under the district plan, we term the utilities, and so we're allowed to do work as a right.
And my last question is, I noticed a lot of those works, there's either a river or the sea next right there. So in terms of environmental impacts of the road's fallen away, you put a new road in, is that part of the monitoring that takes place in terms of the road in construction and this finished job, is the potential for whatever runoff goes into those waterways? Are you folk involved in that?
Yeah, like East Cape Road, those are individual consents. So we've got a package of consents because we split them out because they're actually bigger than and they go out to tender rather than just going through the maintenance contract because they just need a small rigor, and part of the contracts have to include the consent conditions.
Right. So my next question, which leads to, and I've got my environmental hat on right now, my tangata whenua has just been parked up just for a moment, but in terms of, so if you want a contractor to do a stretch of road, like for example what we're looking at now, do you leave it to the contractor to determine the materials that they're going to use, the construction of the road in terms of drainage and so on, or do you people have input into that?
Yeah, yes. So what we did is we did initial scoping, but what happened with the CPS team and our team, we actually had to mark out what we wanted, and then we had to, that was what was put there. Thank you.
So if I can quickly jump in there, Barney, we do the spec, it's our spec for the things that are done on the road. So the aggregate has to be to our spec, everything, the footings, everything has to be shown that it's done. If it's something that needs a resource consent, then if it's operating under our resource consent, that has to have the conditions met during the construction. So silt detention, all of those things have to be taken into account as part of our physical works for our normal BAU. The only time it's retrospective is if it's in an emergency work, like that stuff up behind you there, where we're able to do because we had families trapped on the other side of it. So that's completely different, but we have to apply, we are the biggest consent applicant to council because the teams put so many consents in for everything that we're doing, and then there's ongoing monitoring the whole time that it's happening as well.
So I'll just, the Tauwhare Parae Road there, we've actually got 7 retaining walls that were planned, all of this volume and calibre. The Curry Construction were the team that won that tender, and to date they finished 5 of the 7. In amongst the whole COVID-19, their crew on one of those sites were actually out because it was deemed an emergency to keep working through it. And as you know, we're now doing the TRIP hazardous tree program at the moment as well, $5.3 million worth. And that's firewood for the processing sites that will be distributed to our local community. Yeah.
The stuff that was cut up on the Wharekōwhai Road, it was gone inside of 2 days, and it was all ringed nicely, and just people came and collected it with whatever they had. Some people put it in the boots of their car.
Yep.
But it was really, really awesome.
And this was L'Oreal's initiative, the whole design and everything with the bus shelters. So I think that was a great accomplishment for her. It was one of her major projects last financial year. So hopefully you've seen the new bus shelters and they're looking pretty great. And they've all got a like a graffiti protection on them as well. And these are some of the people with the Tairawhiti redeployment package, faces to the numbers. That's it, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Well done, Baraki.
I just want to make a comment, just from a cultural perspective. The reason why our roads fall away the way that they do, and Bill, Councillor Burdett understands this, I think all of us do anyway, is that in our history, and people would say, well, you know, it's only a myth, but according to our history, Maori fished up the North Island. So effectively, you've built a solid structure on the fin of a fish. So from a cultural, if I put my multicultural lens on, that's what we see. And as a result, not only are you having to attend to the reconstruction work and all the rest of it, or new work using engineering, and that there's actually, for what it's worth, a cultural perspective of it, which makes your job even more difficult. Because culturally, in terms of our Māori tradition, the fish is moving. So you're building a solid structure on, you know, you could look at it from a mythological point of view, or, you know, doesn't make sense from an engineering point of view. But that's the reality in terms of how Māori think generally, in terms of what you're having to face, particularly up on the East Coast, because that's the edge of the fish right there. So anyway, I just thought I'd pass on that.
Very true,
for what it's worth.
Mr. Wilson would agree with you entirely that the top of the Mata Road and Ohongia Road is just like your fish, going like this all the time. Thank you for that.
One more question. Great work, L'Oreal, on the beautification of that building. Do you find that people graffiti over it after you've done an artistic work like that on a building?
Thank you. Thank you very much to the team at the back. Thank you, everybody. Any further question in the room?
Taken seriously. I've been around long enough to know that this is a safety issue and it's a critical issue. I was very disappointed that council turned down the opportunity because we had the expertise, we had the vehicles, we had the staff with dogs that got out and did the pounding at night, did the job. Downers, and I mentioned privately to Emma, Downers don't have that. Two of the former guys used to work for me. They don't even have their own men supplied with a vehicle. I mean, I took no notice of this for a while until I went straight to an accident that happened just outside Ruatoria 3 weeks ago. A cow had been bowled. The fellow came from Taurua. I didn't bother to check whether the vehicle was registered and warranted. More concerned with the safety issue. I rang, got my man to come and tell him to drag this thing away. The police turned up, had a casually look at it and said, no, you got it under control. And before the animal was taken away, Downers turned up to have a look. Now, if that's an example of what's been happening for the period of time that council haven't been in operation, there's problems, major problems. So I just would like the next Regional Land Transport meeting, we have a paper on the legality of grazing the highway. This is Highway 35 because I recall coming to an environment and planning meeting where they were trying to get a regulation in place and they objected to it in terms of grazing the road.
That's why I raised it today. I think our officers will look into that. I
Well,
just think Mr. Wilson might want to clarify. We didn't decline it, did we, Mr. Wilson? Would you just like to clarify?
well, I mean, I was told that they said we were too dear.
Excuse me, can we, I mean, I don't want to be tough, but we need to confine our process to the meeting. Ms. Wilson not, so if Mr. Wilson's going to reply.
Through you, Madam Chair, we have a fencing bylaw, which is the one that we're referring to, and it was around fencing on the state highway. And if I remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Seymour, it's around, we have a bylaw which limits how you can temporarily fence stock on the side of a local road or behind a hot wire, those kind of things. When it went to NZTA for their consideration, they had a different spec as to what could be done on the state highway. And it fell over at that point because something happened around them coming back around what was a safe way to tether a horse or to graze stock on the side of the highway. And we haven't heard back from it since.
And Mr. Mr. Burdett is referring to us not wanting the contract for wandering stock now. That's not quite correct either.
To clarify that, through you, Madam Chair, the contract was brought back by NZTA, so NZTA pulled that back. It had nothing to do with council staff. We were advised that they were taking it back because they thought they could get better value for money somewhere else. It's something for NZTA to discuss. It's their decision.
On record, Madam Chair, that our staff that did the job in the northern part of the coast did a bloody good job.
Thank you. I'm sure the committee secretary got that. Thank you very much. Is there any other, minus the pleative, any other matter in the room? I just want to apologise, gentlemen, that you did not have all of the agenda because it is very hard to be a participant in the process or understand what we're planning when you don't have it. So I'm sure we'll do a whole lot better next time. Is there anything you would like to ask or say at this point in the meeting? Thank you. Appreciate that you've persevered for the day. To our police officer, anything you wish to add?
I would just add some good news that e-bikes are coming to a police station near you very soon. So we will have officers by Labour weekend with e-bikes available for their deployment. And
I hope they won't be on the footpath running down our older residents. Ms. Herbert, do you have anything further?
People were very efficient and acted brilliantly, they were told. That's not what's happening at present.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can interject here. There are we are seeing a spike on the local roads as well. It's not just the state highway. A lot of it is down to the lack of feed that is across the Rohi at the moment. So there are a number of people who have just put stock out into riverbeds and those things, and we're dealing with that. So a lot of it is around people just don't have the feed. There's no grass. They've turned their stock out, and that's what we're seeing pop up on local roads and state highway.
But I would suggest that that is not regular farmers on the East Coast. That is not a behaviour but it tends to be more lifestyle and village related. Anything further around the table? Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Trooper to close the meeting. Thank you.
Ki ora no tātou, kia tau kia tātou katoa te ata whai o tō tātou ariki o hiu karaiti. Me te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga taitanga ki te wairua tapu. Ake, ake, ake. Āmene.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.